It is 2:00 and this meeting is called to order. All of our trustees are here. Our attorney was asked to show up after the budget. No sense in paying him to sit here and listen to us talk about the budget. Anyway, all right, so then we will have our Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, and moving right along to our budget work session and discussion. Bertrand, assuming you want to make a presentation.
So I included several items in your packet. The first is titled Financial Strategies. And then you have a memo titled Budget Work Session. And then you have these 25 income statement budget analysis, which is several pages, 5 pages. And then you have the FY25 worksheet. And then you have a document titled Proposed Job Category Structure 53024. So I'll start at the beginning of everybody's. Okay. So for financial strategies, I thought it was important to highlight 4 items that in my opinion are the basis of further decisions that will directly impact the budget and the process of budgeting. The first is a response to community growth. And I know this won't be a surprise hearing the phrase facility master plan, but we do have noted growth in the triangle of Hayden, Rathdrum, and Post Falls in particular. There are options to review, like a single larger facility with a regional service model. It has a high initial cost, but it may ultimately be more efficient. For example, 1 roof instead of 3 roofs. And so as part of my recommendation, I would recommend in the short term, considering leasing office space for admin and district support staff. And then that would in turn allow the expansion of public space at Hayden and Post Falls to provide some short-term relief. The estimated cost for a lease would be approximately $120,000 per year. Later, I'll talk about the facility master plan as well. I think it's also important to note, number 2, your fund balance in CARF it was pointed out in this year's audit that we have increase in risk related to our aging facilities, systems, vehicles. So for increase of risk and high deductibles, possibility of being underinsured, and the possibility of litigation for relating to harmful to minors, I would recommend that the board consider increasing the operating expenditures on hand, or that's also called the carry forward or the fund balance. Number 3 of consideration would be for outreach services and the phasing of elimination of services. It's possible for fiscal year 25, the recommendation would be to consider eliminating bookmobile service and youth outreach and replace the Sprinter van when it becomes inefficient to repair it. The recommendation would be to set aside $125,000 for both fiscal year 25 and 26. The vehicle's current mileage is over 100,000. If you set aside funds, then moving forward, you would be able to replace it. If you do not, then I think considering the scheduling and the elimination of lobby services beginning in September of 2025. Finally, number 4, a major consideration is the Harrison lease with Harrison Grange. For fiscal year 25, my recommendation would be to set aside $100,000 per year for the Harrison facility. The Harrison lease expires June of 2025. I would recommend initiating a public-private partnership to raise awareness and funds for a new modular structure to replace the aging structure. Facility replacement goal would be at least 7 years or 2032. And for fiscal year 26, my recommendation would be, if no facility replacement funds are set aside this year, schedule the elimination of Harrison Library Service and notify the public of the board's timeline and the range of the lease changes. I go into a little bit more detail in the budget work session memo. It starts with salaries and benefits. A 4% COLA for all staff is the market increase per McGrath Human Resources Group. I outline the staff turnover rate for fiscal years 22, 23, and 24. The health insurance is estimated to increase 15% for this year. In June, staff will present more information about compensation to reduce turnover and incentivize longevity. The district benefit cost is increasing as multiple part-time positions are eliminated and combined to form a singular full-time position as recommended by McGrath Human Resources Group. You can see that the change is occurring over 23, 24, and 25. In terms of new positions or changes in positions, I'm recommending a human resource manager. The annual salary would increase wages by $70,000 approximately. A new facilities specialist one. Currently, there are 2 full-time facility staff, a facility manager and a facilities specialist for 7 facilities. In 23-24, the budget part-time facility assistant position was eliminated, if you recall. The new position allows a separation of duties for facility specialist 1 and 2. The annual salary for a full-time facility specialist 1 would increase wages by approximately $38,000. Restructuring adult services coordinator. The adult programming coordinator and outreach manager would be merged under one position. The new role would include overseeing outreach and ADA accommodation for district public programs and services. Added responsibility is not anticipated to increase wage. The elimination of the outreach manager role would result in salary savings of $50,000. Next, the elimination of the communications coordinator with the annual salary of approximately $53,000. The proposal would be to restructure the web manager to include oversight of social media. Added responsibility is likely to increase wage by 5% or $2,500. A new administrative assistant full-time with a salary of about $43,000. Changes are estimated to result in salary savings of about $7,500. The change in all positions and a COLA for all staff is estimated to increase costs by $179,000 in salaries and benefits and results in an added member to the library's administrative team and is anticipated to decrease the district's employment-related risks and burden on legal services. The next category is district general operation costs. This is the area that CLN's budget is rising the most. The insurance budget is increasing from $51,000 to $130,000, an estimated increase of $78,707. Legal services budget is increasing from $47,000 to $100,000, an estimated increase of $53,000. CIN's budget is increasing from $34,000 to $45,000, an estimated increase of $10,785. Storage and office space is moving from $4,500 to $124,000, an estimated increase of $120,000 to $150,000 to support offsite district functions to free up space for Post Falls and Hayden. The planned expenditure of the carry forward in the fund balance. Financial operations strategy the board should consider for achieving financial stability and growth for the next 5 to 10 years would be $35,000 for a facility master plan and $30,000 one time to stabilize revenues from declining sales tax. The next several pages talk about the changes in revenue that are anticipated. I don't know if Janelle wants to highlight anything in particular. I can just talk about the sales. Okay. if you look at line 3, income, sales tax, and equipment, it is difficult to predict, but there has been a trend over the last year or two that we've been receiving less. And so what is in your budget worksheet on line 3 shows from $300,000, which was approved as the amended budget, down to $245,000. The rest of the revenue for income is described. I think the only other item to mention is lines 6, 7, and 8. Those are the state replacement funds. The business manager spoke about this in the past, but I'll remind the board that we don't traditionally budget for those numbers. The item 1A, which is income from property tax, essentially includes that, and we are later able to allocate how much we receive. Is that a good description?
The state will decide at a later point of how much property tax is levied that the state will fund, and so that's the replacement. So it's not something that we know what that number will keep our number in the levy amount, and then when the replacement funds come in, we can show what was replacement and what was actual levied on individuals.
I hope that makes sense.
It is a little complicated, but I hope it makes sense.
Okay, Buzz, first.
For Janelle, I didn't look at that, but did those two add up, the property tax income and the state replacement? Does it basically add up to what we had budgeted for property tax? Or is there some magic higher amount? Or maybe you can't tell till the end of the year.
In the current budget cycle we're in now.
Yeah.
We hadn't budgeted for it because we had no idea what number it was going to be. But my understanding is if you add up the replacement dollars plus what we receive in levy dollars, it is supposed to be the amount we levied. Now, we don't always get all of our property tax dollars because not everybody always pays, but it kind of washes between people catching up and those not paying.
I was just asking if you confirmed that, because I didn't go back and.
That was my understanding after several conversations with the county, is that what the replacement dollars are, if you add to your levy dollars, then that's your levy.
Okay, so I'll move on to expenses if there's no more questions about income. Obviously, one of the largest expenses is salaries and benefits. And I already mentioned that the increase in medical is expected to go up 15%, dental is expected to go up 5%. There's also some additional PURSUANT contribution rates that we've been informed of. This budget is not 100% of every employee. It's an approximation, or 80% of their scheduled hours. So we do not budget fully for every employee working every hour. The adult programming line 28 is now responsible for expenditures for emerging technology programs. And
What do you mean by that?
there used to be a line breakout when we had an emerging technologies librarian, and we had.
I got you.
Mhm. It's now been incorporated into adult programming and the adult programming budget. I'll just skip a little bit. Line 32, communications and marketing. Approximately 65 to 70% of the budget is for promoting the largest program, summer reading. And on your table today, I did include our new summer reading guide, so you can see. Just gonna skip a little bit. I think we always kind of joke that we're not recommending any decrease or increase to the snow removal, but it's kind of a crapshoot what happens. Line 68, CIN does show an increase this year. The costs are distributed among all member libraries with a formula, but ours is going up. Postage is also very difficult to predict, with rate hikes often happening after we've done budgeting. I'm kind of the numbers person, so if you guys want to look at the numbers, the sheet. You have here on the left column, the fiscal year 24 approved and amended budget, and then you have the 25. This year,
I'm sorry, what page are we on at this point?
it's the page that looks like this, the first one.
Oh, back to the first, okay. Sorry.
So the column on the right does have growth input. It has 0%, and it does reflect what the board's request was last year, that E-rate is included, as if we will assume we get it, although that is not a guarantee. So if you skip to the very bottom, you can see that, again, the district general operations went from 555,000 to 826,000. So that showed one of the largest increases. The total expenditures is listed there. The board did request a balanced budget. And so this year it just shows using fund to balance the budget. Trustee Claus?
So just to clarify, with growth only for FY 25, that's the 0% increase in property tax, but growth of 85,000.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And E-rate included with the discounts.
Yeah.
So this does require a carry forward reserve use of $2 million. If you recall from my earlier statement, I believe that for conservative financial management, that using $65,000 is probably appropriate. We can come back to that, but I will go over the details of the job categories with a 4% cost of living adjustment. So just as a reminder, it lists on the left side, the job category, the range that would be affected with the 4%, the number of staff that are impacted, the percentage of our total staff, the total proposed salary, and the percentage of our entire personnel budget. The last column does show what benefits are offered. So for example, the circulation assistant, we have 7, and they receive no additional benefits except for wage. At the bottom of that first page, we've included, again, the total staff, the percentage, or the number that are part-time managers and coordinators, and full-time. The final page shows how we came up with the budget numbers with the breakdown of salaries, PURSUANT retirement benefits, medical, employee assistance, VEBA, employment taxes, and total salaries and benefits. And again, the far left column is the total scheduled hours. We budget for 87%, and then you'll see the final column with the approved budget. So I'll turn it over to Janelle.
Just to clarify, we budget 100% of staff that receive paid time off benefits and only 87% of staff that do not get paid time off benefits.
So I'll just summarize that. Most years without inflation, you don't have quite this picture. This year, the cost of landscaping, the cost of courier service, the cost of staff, the cost of everything is optimally would be 5%, but what we're receiving for our new contracts is more in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% for a lot of those items.
Trustee Claus?
So back on the proposed salary sheet, the last one. 80, the second column, 87% reduction. Is only. It is not, does not include salary people there 100%. Is that what you were referring to? Or you're saying the scheduled hours? Is the scheduled hours everybody 100%?
So we have 63 part-time in this proposal and 32 full-time. So what I understand is that the 32 full-time would be at 100% and the 63 part-time would be at 87% for budgeting.
For which column?
The 80% reduction column. 87% reduction column.
Is the 63 employees.
So
What's
the first column of at scheduled hours would be budgeting 100% of all hours that they could work. And if you look, the first line, it says staff with PTO, that same number carries over to the 87% column. But the staff without PTO, that's the reduction. Does that help?
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit of history on how we've over time been budgeting personnel, and it's been this way for 6+ years, something in that neighborhood. The library district used to budget 100% of hours, and then about 6 or so years ago shifted to this model where not everything was budgeted for.
We did that because people don't work 100% of the time, especially, the people that are not salaried. So there was a reduction in that. Question.
Trustee Blanket?
So bottom line here on the last page of this worksheet, it shows that right this minute with a 0%, we're at $732,687 in the red. Is that correct? Is that what we're saying? That's the bottom line. It is the regular budget sheet. It is the very left, it's line 89. And it shows that when all is said and done, including all the carry forward and stuff like that, we have, I'm not at liberty to ask you to speak, but can the business manager was wanting to answer that, I think.
Okay, without objection?
So that number that you're looking at on line 89 is current revenues less current expenditures. And in order to balance the budget that you see on the following page, which is 00, it is using carry forward funds to cover that deficit.
Okay.
And I'll point out one other number. So on that last page, it does have funds available for expenditure, and our estimate of the carry forward balance at the end of April is 2.7 million. And so in order to balance this, it's requiring 2 million of the 2.7 million. Is that correct?
we are estimating that for the following fiscal year expenditures is $2,042,063.
Mhm.
But as of April 30th, we are estimating that we'll have the 2.774 in carry forward funds.
Mhm.
And so we'd have more carry forward funds than necessary to operate the first 4 months of the following year, if that tracks.
Professor Robinson?
So it's normal though, right? To carry forward is supposed to be utilized into the next fiscal year. Right?
We need it.
Right, but I mean, on the last page and then the actual last page where it says 0. I'm not sure if the 732,000 in the negative is a bad thing, because in the next page, you're saying that the carry forward, with the carry forward being used, it's a 0 balance. But we always use carry forward.
We always use carry forward. Currently, it looks like we have excess carry forward.
Okay.
Mr. Glass?
So on this last sheet that has 0 at the bottom, where you have it in red, April 30th, the estimated carry forward, is that estimated September 30th of 2024, or is that as the actual amount on April 30th?
So when I looked at the numbers on April 30th and estimated out revenues and expenditures for the rest of the year, that's what I'm estimating that we will have come September 30. That is a fluid number though.
That's a lot more than we had last year for September 30th.
Again, these are all very early preliminary estimates, and it is very likely to change in our next budget workshop.
But what I meant is we somehow or another, I still don't have an explanation. I have to look through stuff, but we ended up with a lot more money than what we budgeted for,
We also have projects we haven't done yet
that we budgeted for.
that were in carry forward that from the prior year. Like the
But that
work
was, but it was in the budget.
it was in the budget, but it didn't get used the last fiscal year, so it's in carry forward. And so if we go through with the project, then that money would come out of carry forward and reduce those available funds.
But I think that was counted for in what we had for carry forward. I just think, I have to go back and look at my numbers, but I think we got an extra 2 million that I still don't understand how we got that.
So I think overall, the board needs to consider risk. We're going into a new fiscal year where there, as I mentioned, concerns about litigation relating to harmful to minors. We don't currently have liability coverage for anything in that area. So we could experience and require our fund for unanticipated or unplanned events like that. We don't know what our insurance policy is going to look like. We did suffer 2 major multi-million-dollar claims this year, so it's uncertain whether or not our deductibles will be increasing, which I think is a possibility as well, which would require or precipitate us to keep more in cash to pay for that as well. The estimates for insurance and legal services are in here, and they show significant changes. So there is some risk that the district is facing. And so that's usually when you consider holding on to your funds rather than expending them. As I said, I'm much more comfortable with us identifying the dip in sales revenue, sales tax revenue, and putting a little bit of funds towards that. So the anticipation is essentially that the dip will just be for a year or two, so temporary, while the market turns down. And so I don't see a concern, essentially spending savings, if you will, for that, to maintain the level of services. The other thing that the board really needs to consider and start planning for is facility design and expansion. Population growth is real, and we need to figure out a plan of how we're going to approach that moving forward. So for both of those, for our understanding and knowledge and long-term planning, I think that's a reasonable and responsible use of the reserves as well. The other items, they're increasing costs. That's what the year is facing.
Trustee Boss?
So I'm still back on trying to clear up where the extra money came from. In the middle of all this, we've got a couple $1 million or almost 1.6 million in insurance claims. I don't think any of that's settled, but if some of that been paid into this, and we haven't spent money replacing materials, is there something going on this year that we're right? It's confusing us. We're in the middle of extra money came in, but we haven't finished the construction. We haven't finished buying the materials that need to be replaced. I'm not comfortable seeing that we really have this money. Is there still something going on with insurance that's in the middle of this? Or insurance claim?
Most of the insurance expenses should be occurring before September. I would anticipate for the Apple project, 100% of expenses to occur this fiscal year. The Post Falls project, there may be some remainder, but it would be less significant. Not more than $200,000 to $300,000 that may be expended that would be carried over into next fiscal year.
As of April 30th, we had received limited funds for insurance claims, and that is not included in that estimated carry forward budget dollars because it is designated for the insurance claim. We received more monies after April 30th, and so it's not in here.
I have
a question for the director. So do the iCrimp rates, are they, as far as you know, adjusted based on claim history like a regular, I'll call it regular commercial? Like, should we expect, because we have some significant claims, that our rates are gonna go up, or ours similar in terms of the premiums to the other libraries, I guess, within Idaho, since it serves not just us, obviously, most public facilities.
So in this district, we've really only had one claim in 5 years, and it seemed to make negligible impact on our annual premium. So I can't speak to what these claims will do. The estimate in here is moving from a political subdivision like iCrimp to a private for-profit insurance company. And that's why it's like 3 times in the estimate.
Mr. Robinson?
And just a reminder, iCrimp raised our rates before the actual events. So the raise that we got in premiums from iCrimp was before the what happened to Post Falls and Apple. I understand what the trustee is asking. Can they also raise it because of that? But they can raise it for other reasons because they did.
Okay, they didn't raise it, I don't think. They just dropped many of our coverages and left.
6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah.
I think it was like 48,000 one year and it went up to 52,000. So it wasn't, I'm just gonna say 5,000-ish is what the increase was from over the last 2 years. It had always been under 50,000, and this was the first time that it was over 50,000.
A lot of it does relate to the increase in construction costs when they do have claims from their clients.
Personally, I would be more concerned about being subject to higher deductibles. I believe our claim deductible for both of these is like $2,500 per claim or something like that. It's very, very low, and that is unheard of. We are extremely fortunate. I would expect us, if we have an event, to pay a much higher deductible with a for-profit company.
Right? Can I ask what at the beginning of September 1st, and maybe it's right here in front of me, what our carry forward was at that point in time, or on, yeah, October 1? Do you remember I mean, is it on one of my sheets and I'm not? What did we walk into this year? What did we walk?
These are all budget numbers, not actuals.
I understand that.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
And nobody has that? They don't have last year's?
I don't
didn't
have it
bring-
with me, no.
Okay.
Trustee Robinson?
Thank you.
Back on the financial strategies sheet. On number 4, for instance. The set aside 100,000 per year for the Harrison lease. So that's a recommendation starting this year. Finding $100,000, that's not worked into this, the draft budget, is that correct? So just saying a recommendation would be to also do the financial strategies that are listed here.
So this is part of where I think having a facility master plan would be extremely helpful. I can only speculate with the experience that I have and the experience that our facility manager has. The Harrison property is leased. We're doing significant water remediation and drainage work on it this year. We're doing the ADA accessible sidewalk and things like that. But it is 2 modular buildings that have been essentially put together. The older modular building is aging. Modular structures do not necessarily have the same anticipated lifespan of a stick-built or a commercial facility. And so I would, in the ballpark, feel comfortable saying that the older part of the structure, I would not be surprised if in the next 10 years, the cost of maintenance and maintaining the systems becomes very prohibitive. And again, I think the board needs to do the study and the research and get the information so that they can start putting aside funds for it, for a replacement structure or 2 replacement structures. The important part is that we typically sign a lease for 20+ years. And so the board having more information and to be able to communicate to the community of Harrison, to the Grange, and to all of the stakeholders. If we're going to replace the facilities, and then we need to include a lease that perhaps is for an extensive amount of time, and may include things like additional land work that we may need to do for water drainage. And so again, we're coming very quickly up, which is my point for the board, that we need to start making decisions. Those failing systems are going to happen before you know it. And right now, we don't even know, other than the speculation that the facility is elderly, if you will, aging rapidly, and it doesn't have the same kind of estimated lifespan as other facilities. So I think the board needs to either work with the community to raise funds, or do the study again, talk to the Grange, all those kinds of things. That's very much a piece that's bigger picture that the board needs to be considering. The same is true for outreach. Are we going to continue? Our vehicles, our large buses cost $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and we haven't put any funds away for replacement. Best practices is for you to put 1/10 of the replacement cost aside per year. So our vehicles, our bookmobile is 17 years old, 16 years old, 18 years.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's like 18 years old, I think, currently. So average life expectancy would be 13 years.
Which vehicles, 13 or 18?
The bookmobile.
What about the Sprinter? Because that's what you were.
The Sprinter, I mean, I'll be direct in saying is that my assumption is that this board's intention is to de-ascension the Discovery Bus and the bookmobile at the end of this fiscal year. And continue with outreach, continue with accommodation services, and continue with the Sprinter vehicle. I think that's a realistic long-term strategy that's cost efficient. However, given that the Sprinter vehicle is aging and has no funds set aside for replacement, and so I would hate to be in the district in a position where all outreach has to end, because a component of our outreach is part of our accommodation for individuals with disabilities. So we could be facing some federal concern, if you will, if we completely eliminated outreach services. And so I think the board giving clear direction that yes, the expensive vehicles that do not have a replacement fund are going to be ending their service life, being clear so that the staff can communicate with the stakeholders and the affected communities and the affected individuals that use the services, as well as staff. If we have enough time, we can redeploy the staff in a service manner that would eliminate the need for their positions being eliminated. So I think direction from the board is really important so that we can, again, manage the rest of the process.
I'm sorry.
Mine's super quick.
Trustee Robinson?
I'm just curious, where would those, when we put money aside for the Sprinter van, where does that money reside? Is it car? Okay, thank you.
And it's just an identification that we know that, kind of like the Hayden.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
We know it was gonna be that.
Yeah, Trustee Wagner, Blake?
By eliminating bookmobile service, do we know how many people use it? Who are we, I realize bookmobile service is kind of going down some, is that correct? I mean, it has, outreach, I should have looked at our circulation statistics, but is that, how many people are we looking at that are not going to be getting library service?
I can bring that information, but I'm gonna be really direct and honest and say, we basically, missed the bullet this year where we had to have custom built brakes for the vehicle, and we were concerned about transmission issues. So we are one major system failure on that bus from having to completely eliminate service. My preference or recommendation would be to be proactive and strategic. I believe that the bus could garner maybe $30,000 to $40,000 on the resale market. The Discovery Bus may also be able to, as long as it's in working roadworthy condition. And so while I can see that there are going to be individuals that are impacted by service, I don't know that we have a lot of choice. This vehicle is not going to survive at any time in the next 2 years. And again, we don't have a ton budgeted for outreach repairs. And so again, if we want to keep an aging vehicle in service, we would just need to increase the anticipated expense for repairs. But again, I would prefer that it be strategic and planned so that we can communicate with the citizens and with staff. And again, perhaps if we do sell a vehicle, those funds could perhaps come back to be set aside for the Sprinter van. Let's just say that. I think that would be appropriate as well. So if we got $40,000, maybe that would, or Harrison, or one of our other projects that are capital related.
Trustee Hammond?
I'm very supportive of the idea of decommissioning, I'll call it, the bookmobile and Discovery bus. I think it, between the costs that were outlined once of putting those back into regular service, and I think over the last many years, most people have transportation adequate to go to a regular facility rather than have mobile. But I definitely would probably see a need to keep a Sprinter van and possibly set aside money for that. I like that idea. And I want to go back to the Harrison discussion. I don't know, can we set money aside? Because I thought it when it was a new facility or acquisition of real estate that had to be a bond issue. I didn't know we could save money up to, so to speak, purchase a new facility. Maybe that could be clarified for me.
I would say the initial funds would be to review the site, to do additional planning. So I don't believe that that part is necessary.
I don't believe you can use car funds to purchase land or to build a new facility.
Right.
But if you're replacing the facility, you're replacing a capital asset.
Okay.
So I can get clarification on that part of it, if we can use car funds to replace the building. Because you're not going and putting it on new land, you're not getting you're not buying a new facility. You're just replacing a facility.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not sure.
because it's modular, I can get clarification on that.
Trustee Blake?
Back to outreach services, what are the youth services that are indicated here that you were talking about eliminating? Just eliminate bookmobile service and youth outreach, youth outreach.
I'm sorry, what page is that?
It's on the same financial strategies, it's under eliminate outreach services. It said eliminate bookmobile service and youth outreach. And I was like, I just was wanting to have some clarification on what youth outreach was.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of history. This last year, when the youth services programming budget went down, we reduced youth outreach 30%. So we've already done one significant reduction in youth outreach. This would be a second round of reduction. Youth outreach can be everything from story times in the park to Head Start and daycares. I can have Lindsay talk a little bit more about what we already reduced and what this could potentially mean. But it essentially is, good or bad, bringing staff back into the facilities to be able to offer as many programs and services here in our facilities as possible, and emphasizing less of that, bringing more people in, new people in, serving people that can't get to the library or in different locations. Did you want more description of what youth outreach is?
So what you're saying is we take story time to Head Start. It's that's what you're saying. And the encouragement there is, the thing there is we encourage, it helps people learn about the library, that are non-users, especially kids.
Well, and, I'm going to talk a little bit of philosophy, but, a lot of times daycares and Head Start, sometimes, staff are trained and professional librarians. And so interacting with children and being a role model of how to interact and engage children in books and songs and all of our early literacy principles. So when we go out and do outreach, we're actually providing training or information for the parent or the teacher or the grandparent and caregiver of the child, as well as those rich development activities, as well as providing the resources like books that are developmentally appropriate, materials that are manipulatives and things like that, the full experience. And so again, we would not focus on that. We would focus on the individuals that come for story time, for example.
So
I'm sorry.
I don't, this is part of the ongoing thing. Do I have
But we're
to?
not supposed to have the back and forth. It's,
I'm just trying to get a better picture of what youth services are and what the reason for talking about this. It's all of a package. It's not a back and forth. I just need more information. And I didn't know how to put it into a full, long sentence.
yeah, I understand. Trustee Foss, do you mind if she finishes or?
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
So eliminating the bookmobile services has to do with the vehicles being so expensive to replace. But eliminating youth outreach is simply because we need to reduce money, but it's not necessarily someplace, a place we want the library to go. I would have thought that kind of outreach is a place where we would want the library to head. I'm talking about a philosophical thing here. Is that correct? Or is it becoming a much better library model to not do youth outreach?
I'll just give you the sort of rock and a hard place scenario. Do we have a preschool story time at every one of our branches? So I think that's really important.
Do we not?
Well, we do currently, but our programming budget was cut last year pretty significantly.
So you're saying if we don't do outreach, we can have it. So, okay, because we cut programming, we cannot have any kind of youth services outreach. So we can't take story time to Head Start. Okay.
I'll let Lindsay talk a little bit about that too. I mean, she can talk about what tough decisions we made last year and why it's being considered this year in light. It comes down to prioritizing the services, and I rely heavily on our youth services coordinator to advise, and so I know Lindsay does as well, and so I'll let Lindsay talk a little bit more.
Without objection? Okay, go ahead, Assistant Director.
There are different philosophies on library service, so the Community Library Network, I would say, is quite outwardly focused when it comes to utilizing staff time to get into the community and provide programming at Head Start or parks or things like that. There is a different philosophy in which you use all of your resources internally, in which you have more robust programming. You have, 3 preschool story times at your busiest libraries on Wednesday, back to back to back. So you get all families that can be available. So it's a shift in looking at how we serve and when we serve our community. We have cut some of our programs because of the 30% budget reduction. And it's a difficult decision to know what to cut. I think we have to prioritize, if we're doing outreach again next year, serving only those in our service area and developing a model that works with bringing more people in the building and then also making sure we're serving those in our service area. So I don't know if that helps.
Thank you.
Trustee Potts?
Yeah, so we jumped all around from when I first wanted to talk. And I'll try to cover about 4 things. I found our FY carry forward sheet from September, 1.95 million, 1.95 million. So that was where I was kind of figuring 500,000 or 450,000 a month burn rate. We have October, November, December, January, so 4 months times, 500,000 is 2 million. So when I compare that to this new sheet that we just got here, if the carry forward, didn't we say carry forward was like 2.3 million, 2.7? So it's 700,000 more is, I guess, the answer to that question. The other is Harrison. I've lost track of this, but we had capital budget set aside 56,000 for Harrison back in September for the budget this year. And I think we never spent it. I think we just kept waiting for the water study, the engineering study, and I never heard anything about it. Did we spend money on that? Or is that 56,000 gone? Because I didn't think we authorized it yet.
Did I answer that?
Yeah, I've got more questions. So she can either answer it or we finish my, she can answer it.
It might be easier to answer.
We have spent a portion of it. The majority of the work has not been done. However, we have engaged the architect and the engineer, and they're putting together a package for recruiting the contractors. So we're in the process of it. It is anticipated to be done relatively soon. And more information will be brought once we have that.
But in addition to this 56,000.
That's just to do the sidewalk and the drainage and the immediate, so that we don't have water in the below the building.
I have
You
a
haven't
point of
done that,
order
you mean?
here.
Go ahead.
I just, yeah, if I have to argue to be able to ask several questions, why do not other trustees?
Because I'm gonna ask for,
Okay, well, actually, the chair is going to rule that your point of order is not well received because someone else had their hand up at the time that you guys were going back and forth. And so then that someone else needs to be called on. But right now, there wasn't anyone that still wanted to speak.
do I get to finish? I'm not gonna look.
Point of order. I do want to speak, but he said he had 4 points he was going to make, so I'm literally waiting for his 4 points. And point of order,
Well, then,
I think we need to decide, is it okay sometimes to go back and forth? Because sometimes you have to do that to get a clear question across and a clear answer for everyone. So I think we should decide if it's okay sometimes, and the chair can decide, I guess, if it's okay sometimes to do the back and forth because it's necessary.
yeah, it's just trying to just balance everything. But anyway, your point of order is not well received because you didn't have your hand up. If your hand was up, then I would have known. How would I know that you wanted to speak if you know?
Point of order, I didn't put my hand up because I knew you were going to let him do his 4 questions in one,
Okay.
because that's how you roll. So that's why I didn't bother to do it.
That was your.
And you've also told me in the past, don't put my hand up because we can't wait in line. So it just has to be equal for all. That's all I'm asking. That's all we're all asking.
Okay. Trustee Claus?
So the reason I have 4 questions is because we're jumping all around. We just stay on one topic and cover it. But we've done the Sprinter van, we've done Harrison, we've done carry forward. Anyway, that's why these things. Harrison, I'm wondering whether we've already got a good part of the 100,000 that was asked, is being asked for, that's already in the carry forward for it. So that's a consideration. Sprinter van, I never got my question answered. How old is it? It's got 100,000 miles on it. I don't think, unless there's something seriously wrong, I don't think we need to be replacing it in the next year or two. I don't know how many miles a year does it get? That's another question. We should be setting money aside to replace it, but I don't think it's MNET at 100,000. A lot of these vehicles go 250,000, the newer ones with their way they're designed. So how many miles a year? When did we buy it? And is there something seriously wrong with it that we need to consider replacing? I'll yield back.
Yeah, but Trustee Robinson had her hand up next, so.
Well,
go ahead.
by all means, if you're going to answer his 3 to 4 questions,
Okay.
And
Director?
I'm sorry, are you a mechanic or do you know what's about to break down in the car? Just throwing that out.
So I'll talk about, how you are proactive with large capital investments like vehicles. So in this case, our van is a custom vehicle. It requires design. Most likely, we would be contracting with a specialty company that does specialty vehicles in order to build it or modify it for us in the manner that we want. Typically, there's expense of buying the vehicle, paying them in pieces. And so my estimate of having 2 years worth of money in place is that allows you that third year to design it and then purchase it. So in this scenario, it would be looking at a new vehicle in 3 years. It takes 6 months to 8 months for even a Sprinter. These have like commercial, like Tommy lifts, right? Like they have other modifications and you have to get on their schedule. So it's not like there's, someone in town. Usually it's someone in a specialized company in the Midwest. And so there's a lot more that goes into these recommendations that the trustees wouldn't have that background or information in knowing. The aspect of, service, again, you don't want to be put in a position where you have to put in a new transmission in a vehicle in order to continue service or then completely have to stop service. Part of the goal is to provide ongoing service without disruption. So that's a serious consideration as well. And again, when you are replacing a vehicle, they often do, like I'm talking about now, have a replacement value. So again, it's better to be strategic and to plan and to time. I would prefer to be putting this, as I said, as financial strategies that the board needs to look at this year and next year, rather than saying in 3 years, well, the engine died and it's $40,000 to put a new one in to repair it. And we don't have any choice because it's going to take a year to build a new one. So we're going to put $40,000, which is that whole process of throwing good money after bad money. So all of that strategy is part of the process when it comes to van replacement or vehicle replacement. In terms of Harrison, the $56,000 is anticipated to be spent this fiscal year. So after that, those funds are expended. There will be no funds set aside for Harrison, or there's not anticipated to have any remaining funds set aside for Harrison. So those were the two questions that I specifically heard.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. I don't want to beat this outreach service to death, but why couldn't just one of the regular vehicles, a car, be used for an employee and her book and the prompts to go out to these different locations?
Director?
So I think the board should actually, and we can bring more information, do an analysis of or assist us in our analysis of our fleet of vehicles. We actually have a car and a van that need to be in this replacement cycle as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm only highlighting some of the items, but I do think perhaps in a June or July meeting, we can bring the whole fleet. I also did not bring in the fact that Post Falls roof needs replacement. There is a lot more than what is on these several pages. What I have done is try to prioritize and to get responses or direction on these items so then we can start tackling the next level of items that we need to address. So yes, we do have staff that take a minivan or take a vehicle and go provide service. So that is part of our strategy.
Seems
like we've, reached the lull with the things we're talking about, so I bring up another, staff. I did not try to summarize, but what's the change in head count you're looking at? You pointed out several new positions, eliminating some positions. Is there a summary or there a total number of positions recommended versus what we have now?
Did you want to ask? Oh, please.
Okay, if you turn to this page, the one that looks like this at the bottom of it, it has that tracked information. It's also on my memo. Essentially, this year we have 106 positions and we would be going down to 95 positions. But we would be going from 28 full-time to 32 full-time. And we would be going from 74 part-time to 60 part-time. And again, I will make sure we have more information from our consultants. They're working on some items for us to bring to the board. Longevity and turnover and being in market are still serious considerations. If the board does not do a 4%, then, for example, we would be again below market, which, as you guys learned the last 2 years, it's extremely difficult and very painful to, get back into market after you've been out of it. You have to set aside even more funds. And then again, there's consequences like the cost of training for staff with high turnover. So it's a very dog chasing tail kind of scenario. And so our consultants, I think, did a really fabulous job in their classification study explaining all of those items. And so, like I said, we're happy to bring some of those highlights back to refresh everybody. And then the proposal for us to maybe look at longevity. Longevity is essentially, you've been here 1 year, you've been here 10 years, and you still make the same amount of money. And so that's a serious concern.
Mr. Robinson?
So on the draft, the budget draft, is the 4% added already? Thank you.
Trustee Pause?
So back on this sheet that shows the number of staff, 106 dropping to 95, what I would like to see is for each row, what's it going to? I guess these numbers 7, 27, 10, and so forth are the proposed for this coming year, the budget. But which ones are dropping? If we were dropping 11 people someplace, and I don't have a good feel for that. And then the other question is, where did the 4% come from? Was that from the salary survey 2 years ago? Who did a study? I don't think we authorized a salary study. Is this current information like in the last 6 months or something that rates have gone up 4%? Or is COLA the definition of instead of market? What I'm looking for is, did the market rates go up? Not did housing and inflation and so forth go. COLA to me is cost of living, is the cost of housing and apartments, and what we should be going by is a market survey. And I think the last market survey was 2022.
Okay.
This information is current as of, I think, the last 2 months. This is the recommendation of McGrath Human Resources Group. They were the individuals that did that market survey, in 2022, and this is their recommendation to maintain where we currently are, which is in the lower part of the market value. So this is not bringing staff into the center or average. This is still at a 4% increase for all staff at the lower end of market range. So I'm calling it a COLA. It would be the adjustment necessary to maintain being in the market range per McGrath Human Resources in the last 2 months. In terms of the question relating to new positions, I mean, you see in this memo that we're eliminating the outreach manager. We are eliminating the communications coordinator, but then adding an administrative assistant. So again, it's a swap for savings of about $7,500. So the net in terms of positions on that one is the same. A lot of the positions are, we have 19-hour-a-week and 28-hour-a-week positions, and it is essentially making them 40 hours a week so that they have full benefits. In terms of how we do that, that's again kind of the restructuring of how much is budgeted, how much all of those items cost. But the change of all positions with the cost of living is $179,000, which when you know 70,000 of that is for the salary only of an HR manager, it's very minimal.
What's the boss?
I request that this chart be enhanced a little bit to show FY24 and FY25, a column, and maybe add the rows to things that are being eliminated. I'd like to get a picture of, are we changing? I don't understand. I know there's some of these that were obvious, but are we changing the number of circulation assistants? I don't know. I'd like to know what all we're doing is being recommended.
So I would say the board has the same chart from last year, so you can go back to your budget information last year and compare it and make that analysis. I will say that I think it's important for the board to stay in the approval of budget and job descriptions and classifications and increases. So again, you know, there's essentially 2 times when positions can be modified. One is really in the budget planning, and that's what we're talking about. Anytime there's a new position, it is absolutely the right of this board to have that authorization and approval process. However, once the budget is already approved, then minor modifications can be made by staff. There is great value when a position is vacant or multiple positions are vacant to do that massaging to create the full-time position, which is the trend of what we're going for. So the role of the board would be to either agree with McGrath Human Resources about what this district's right balance of full-time and part-time staff is, and then approve positions that are full-time or full-time only until you reach that. And then again, give the latitude for staff to, again, move in that direction that the board has given in order to achieve that result. Does that make sense? So those are sort of the board level responsibilities rather than all the details down to every single position. So if that makes sense, kind of like giving the board that perspective about what their role is and what they should be focusing on.
Mr. Robinson?
On that same page, just because I can't clear it in my mind, 23, 24, 25, it says 5 part-time, 4 part-time, 3 part-time. But on A across, it says number of staff 7 that have no benefits. So what's the difference between the part-time and no benefits, and why is it 7 and 3?
So at the bottom of the page, it's part-time manager and coordinators. So we are trying, I think, to replace all of our branch managers to full-time positions when possible. It's very difficult to work 32 hours supervising staff, which means that you likely have 4 days that you're on work and 3 days that you're not. And so we are, as a priority, focusing on shifting those first to make sure our managers and supervisors are full-time. And so that line is actually just accounting for the managers and the supervisors that are part-time, and they're being moved into that full-time category.
Oh, I see, because there's 60 part-time.
There's 60 part-time.
Okay, sorry, gotcha.
If I do my math right, I think if you add 60 plus 3 plus 32, you get 95.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
we just have it
Sorry.
broken up a little bit more because we think as a priority that our supervisors and managers should be full-time.
Mr. Boss?
I don't remember seeing the McGrath study from this year, were we given that? Can we get it as part of this?
Let's go ahead, Trevor.
Like I've kind of been saying, we're bringing stuff from McGrath next meeting that talks about longevity. And I can bring the former report and make sure that goes out in the packet so you can review that. It's several pages. So, but it highlights all the direction that we're trying to move forward.
So we haven't seen that yet for this year. I'm talking about the 22.
Yeah, we're still working off of the 22, and they've made a modification, so that's where we got the 4% from. And now they've presented us some information, and we'll be bringing more information in June from them.
See that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Staffing is a really big part. And again, achieving the objectives. It does no good to pay for a study and then not to follow through. And again, we had very specific problems that we needed to address. And so that is what we're trying to do. I will say, the 7 staff, I think, work 10 hours or less. And so, I don't know how that fits in the district's long-time goals and objectives. And so again, those are questions that the administration is asking. But again, these are not what we prioritized for this year for the board to focus on. I can talk quite a bit more, and admin can as a whole, about why we have recommended a human resources manager. We have, as you see, over 100 staff, and the human resource function is divided among administration. We had ICRIMP, and for human resources and employment information and claims. And what we found this year is that losing that counsel, so to speak, or that risk management aspect has been extremely difficult. And then compounding that with the busyness of our legal counsel, that has been difficult to get timely responses. And so I know I feel, and I can allow the staff to speak about it too, but I really do feel like this is critical for managing risk in the district. It would allow someone to be able to come in and have the time to be an expert in this area. We have very talented staff, but again, we don't necessarily have the time to focus on the most current changes in the law and best practices and all of that. And so having a dedicated person, I think, would also be part of our strategy to reduce turnover and to, again, free up some of our legal expenses, which are very expensive, rather than an HR manager, which is actually much less expensive. So those are some of the reasons. I don't know if you want to hear from Lindsay and Janelle, but this is very much our primary focus for the board for consideration for this year.
Mr. Robinson?
So, the want of a human resource manager, is that in the budget? It is, that 70,000 Okay, is everything on? I'd have to read this again, but
Yeah, if you look at the sheet, and I think that's a good idea, maybe we'll grab last year's for you guys to compare it to. You'll see that in column K, there was maybe just a business manager now, and now you see it's in the same bracket as the human resource manager. So we did add that in.
Ms. Foss?
So up till now, CLN has had 106 or more employees and they've never had a HR manager. And is the HR manager pretty much been the director? Or who does that? And why wouldn't we maybe, even with less employees, need somebody part-time? Why would we need a full-time now when we've never had one? I know you've said some things, but I just.
If it's okay, I think hearing the perspective of the staff that are filling in, the HR position and functionality is a little bit divided among the three of us. I think, like I said, I expressed, for me, this is actually a financial decision and risk mitigation. And so that's what I see in this is a need. I also see it as less expensive than calling the attorney at $275 an hour. So this is a very fiscally conservative risk recommendation from me. But I think hearing from the other part of the staff about, I'm not going to call it a burden, but the responsibility is important too.
Without objection, go ahead, Assistant Director.
The duties of human resources are shared between the three of us. So we all have certain tasks that we do and we make decisions together. And I think going back to your question of could it be a part-time person? That actually defeats the whole point of wanting to get our staff into full-time roles. So we would actually be taking a step back if we hired a part-time HR manager. And when you have more when you have more staff that are full-time, you have more issues for enrolling people in benefits. You have more FMLA issues that you need someone to manage. You have more complicated things the more hours people work. And so that's why I believe full-time is needed.
I won't repeat, what has already been said, but I will say, in my tenure here, it has been needed to have someone dedicated to HR. The three of us do have a lot of knowledge, but HR is transforming every day, and there's new rules coming out. We have new rules coming down on determining whether someone can be exempt or non-exempt. And, that it's a salary test, it's a duties test. There's a lot that goes into that. And, my focus is on the numbers. Having to do HR takes a lot of time away from focusing on the numbers to make sure that I am up to speed on making a good decision.
Kelly?
I know obviously that going from part-time to full-time is more expensive in general, I would say, because of the benefits. If we actually follow this schedule at the bottom of that sheet with all the proposed job category structure, when we get to fiscal 25, is that the end of the transitioning of part-time into full-time, or are there more anticipated beyond that?
Okay.
So I guess, how do you know when you've reached the right balance? Right now, I can tell you that we're not. We still have staff that want health benefits. We still have staff that want to work full-time, and we don't have positions for them. So I would say we're not there. You get the data. Again, the turnover and the exit interviews that are saying that people are going to a full-time position. So we're losing good people for a full-time position. We'll talk a little bit more about longevity One of the for me, most painful is actually not losing an employee in the first 6 months. It's actually losing someone in 3 or 4 years. We have a significant investment. They understand the procedure. We have a very inexperienced team. If you look at the average number of years working for a library, it's far below the region. So those are all symptoms, again, of not having the right mix. And so this has all been outlined in that classification study. So again, I think we'll send that out in the next packet so that you guys can review all of that. It will be, again, the next time you do a study and are looking at all of those data and numbers. But I can tell you that I don't expect 25 to be the end. And again, I can base that on the exit interviews, the fact that we're losing key staff, that the turnover is not in the range of desirable. The study points out that 10% or less than 10% can be healthy or can be unhealthy depending on the industry. Again, we have been averaging 28 and 30-something% turnover for years. So, it's kind of like getting into market value. It's really painful to get there. We have a history of adding staff and adding part-time staff and not adding full-time staff. And so that has now gotten us in this position, which is going to take us more than 1 year to get out of. So I would anticipate it not being done in 25.
Okay, and just 2 thoughts on staffing. One, that a lot of people said that if H 710 passed, that they would leave state. And I guess that one's a kind of a negative. But the other one is that, yeah, anytime you make adjustments, you always want to observe and reassess. So that would make sense, and it wouldn't be the end after just 1 year. Just last.
So on your continuation of the staff on your summary sheet about change of positions and stuff, on the second sheet, you've got eliminate communication coordinator. You talked about that. Restructure the webmaster to include oversight of social media. So I assume that's communication coordinator did the social media. We haven't had anybody doing it now. Wonder who's been doing it. And then the next bullet is new administrative assistant. What role is who is the administrative assistant going to work with? How's it being done now, and why do we need a position for that? So what's the reason of adding an administrative assistant?
I think the best answer that might actually bring the administrative assistant job description to the board for you to review. It actually has social media in it, so it also has communication. So there is a component of responding to patrons' requests from the website or emails and things like that, that we can have done by a by an administrative assistant rather than the higher paid communications coordinator position. Currently, the webmaster is doing some of our social media, and we are doing less currently because of the vacancy. Is that a fair characterization? There has been some other staff that have stepped up too, that have been trained and done it in the past, but I wouldn't say we're doing as much as we did before. Thoughts?
So is the administrative assistant independently envisioned to just work on these little projects, or is the administrative assistant helping the managers or helping the director or the assistant director? What is it? Is it an independent position just filling the role of communication coordinator? I don't know.
It is slightly, again, it's a new position. We are currently looking at the webmaster's job description. We're currently looking at all library staff job descriptions. The webmaster used to report to the communications coordinator, and that was the only employee that reported to the communications coordinator. So I'll just say, taking a step back from my organizational structure experience, having a single report is not necessarily the most efficient model. It requires a higher level of pay, and yet it's only one employee that reports to them in one service. And so this is a slight restructuring. We're looking at the webmaster reporting directly to the assistant director rather than the communications coordinator. And we're looking at the administrative assistant, again, reporting to the administrative staff for support in that area. So it hasn't been determined at this point whether that would be the director or the assistant director. But again, we're looking at whether or not the board would consider this option because it is cost savings, as well as we believe within the job description and scope of responsibility of both of these positions.
Stanley?
Does CLN have an organizational chart that shows the hierarchy and the design overall? Because it's difficult, obviously, to visualize 106 employees and who fits under what. Even if it's not 100% accurate or up to date, is there an existing organizational chart? Because that would help, I think, at least for me.
Can you request that? No.
Yeah, so can we get that in the packet?
Thank you.
Thanks.
I would just say I agree. I'm very visual. And I think seeing it as it is currently, and then, like I said, the efficiency and the streamlining is also helpful in a visual format. So I'm happy to do our current and our proposed.
That would be great. Thank you. Mr. Fox?
So another question, last on that page, facility master plan, I think maybe it's covered another place, but has CLN ever had one before? Do other libraries do it? Where did the idea come from? Or is this something that's kind of a city planning or municipal planning idea? But would this be to pay some outside firm to create a plan? And where would they get the input? Would it just be their ideas on what they think we should do? Or would they be talking to the community, or, you know, what is the facility master plan?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to bring even some sample proposals or some information from companies that offer this type of service. So it is possible for staff to do a facility master plan. It's usually not done by staff just because of how time consuming it can be. The library district has had plans done in the past. I want to say 1998. Is that when they did the, I apologize, I can't remember the exact year.
I wasn't around for that one, but we did a facility. It wasn't a facilities master plan. It was more of a space needs plan that was in 2015. And we had tried for a plant facilities levy that failed.
Yeah.
Mr. Blank?
That was for interior.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about exterior. We're talking about buildings. And we've talked for a lot of years about needing a facilities master plan.
Do you want me to continue a little bit more?
Probably. But
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
elaborate.
So I'll just give some experience that I have, and I know other staff have experience too. They can maybe speak to it. But so, for example, when I was in Pierce County, we did a 30-year facility master plan. It's definitely not with thinking in the next 5 years, like a space planning and kind of thing like that, of kind of making the best of what you have. This is really to look at, there's a lot of work with Department of Transportation and where the roads are going and where the growth is expected and what the projections on growth and there's an infusion of that information with the county with best practices in library services. So for example, currently people in facility planning don't recommend a facility of less than 10,000 square feet in order to be able to create a teen space and a meeting room and all of the attributes that people expect in a 21st century library. And so people that work in facility master planning will give you an idea of if you have over 10,000 people within a certain mile range, then it is prudent to plan a 10,000 square foot or larger facility in that space. And so they're going to be talking to cities, counties, talking to community members. It's again, it brings it all together in one document. So there's again, planning and then the report. And then it gives you kind of your marching orders of what you need to start planning for. I feel like, and I'm just going to be 100% direct, this should have been done 10 years ago. You're already in a crisis, which is what you try to do with a plan in advance, right? You try not to get where you're at. And so I would strongly encourage the board to look at this as a possibility and as an investment in the future and future planning. I think this board is going to have in the near future the decision that if you don't have outreach and you have a lot of small rural communities that you have structures in and staff in, then how are you going to afford a larger facility with extra staff to accommodate the double-digit growth that has been predicted, right? So, you know, you're going to have to pivot and make some changes and prepare for that. And again, having this information gives you that ability. I can bring some samples so you can see what a facility master plan is. I've not done any research on who to hire or how much it costs exactly. You get to decide exactly how much detail it is. Some plans go into the strategy of how to fund it, some do not. So again, if you don't want to do a public sort of vote for it, then how else could you do it? But looking at the entire service area and then the individual community. So it's a very valuable tool. Thoughts?
So as you're explaining that, what's going through my mind is this is an opportunity for a plan to come up and say, Hayden and Rathdrum and Spirit Lake and Harrison, they all need new buildings and they need to be twice as big, and because they're growing, and I don't even want to go there. We're not, maybe we could entertain doing something at the most important one every 5 years or something but we can't handle putting twice as big of buildings where we have just because we have population. We have to be frugal and work with what we have. So I don't know whether it's a waste of money to come up with some master plan that's just out there that we can't do.
Yes, go ahead, Director.
So I guess part of how I process or how I think about how do you make changes in small steps, but know that you're moving towards the right vision, the right goal, the right path. How I do that is if I have this laid out, what we should be going for or where we need to get, then when someone comes and says, I'd like to donate $1 million for a new facility on Prairie, or I'd like to do a partnership and we're a developer and we're willing to sell the property to you at cost, you know the answer. Yes, you should take it. Yes, you should do that. Or no, that is not our vision for the future. So that is part of what a facility plan does as well. It gives you the end goal. It gives you the vision. So then when you are confronted with, should we eliminate rural bookmobile service in order to keep an eye on the future of a plot, on the prairie, then, you know what I'm saying? It helps you make better, more informed decisions. It feels a little bit like, we're gonna play chicken and hide in the sand, by not facing the reality of what our future is and what the future growth is. And just because people are satisfied now with the service, staff are feeling it. The crowding, the parking lot here is an issue, right? I mean, it's already getting notice from community members. Well, when you can't come to a story time because the room is full and you're at capacity, when you can't come in the parking lot, when you can't do these services, you're going to receive a lot more complaints. And so you will not be in the same position that you are today. And so again, you need to plan and come up with a strategy on how to achieve those goals, because this public appreciates library service, has a high expectation for excellent library service, and they are not going to be satisfied or think it's good enough that we don't address the real issues in the community.
Mr. Robinson?
And I believe that if, like the director was saying, like, story time is full or the parking lot's too small, I don't think the study would show that this particular location needs a bigger parking lot. It would look at where the patrons are coming from, mostly that are overcrowding the library, i.e. where the property lines are expanding. And that's where they would look or suggest to us that we need to eventually, to have a library in that section of town. So I don't think it's necessarily just looking at the facilities we have, although I might add, it seems like Director Rhoda mentioned that one of these studies would also look at repairs of existing buildings. So that would like we just did the roof here, and you said what Post Falls is looking like it's going to need one. So they would look into what the existing structures need down the line, even like 5 years from now, and what sections of town are growing so much and bombarding existing libraries. So it is and I have to say, when I got on the board, I was very resistant to any kind of study, third-person study, because in my mindset, I was kind of like, well, can't we just like come up with something on our own? But after having two done while we've been on the board, I definitely see the value in these kind of studies. The people are very professional and they are focused on their job, and their job is a very niche type of job where it's easy to sit here and think, well, I can just look at where neighborhoods are going up and where we need to add a library. But I see value in these kind of studies, whereas I did not before I was on the board.
Trustee Blank?
The bond runs out in 2025, and there was a lot of discussion before John Hartung left and looking at plant facilities. And then things became quite disruptive after that. The only way to build a building really would be to go to the voters for another bond. I don't know that we would ever be able to save the money, and you can't save the money, can you? You can't save it from the current taxes. So it absolutely requires a bond, and since the current one would run out in 2025, the plan quite a few years ago was to look at another one in 2025. It was very obvious that new facilities were going to be needed so many years ago.
Mr. Claus?
So I'm trying to cover everything a little bit, but right above it, it seems like it dovetails with this storage office space, 4,500 to 125,000. To support offsite district functions, free up space at Post Falls and Hayden. So is that part of the thinking here, that we don't have enough facilities, so we're going to have to go lease? Or is this now that we've been leasing this facility for storage of books and it's a good opportunity to use it for office space? It looks like it's working out well. Why do we need more office space and storage well, at least office space, if we're going from 106 employees to 95. You know, why do we need office space and to have this $125,000 expense that's being asked for?
It's not that we need more office space. It's my understanding that we would be actually pulling staff out of Hayden and Post Falls to make more public space. So we would be looking at taking, for instance, a large office that's housing the youth services at Hayden, and that would then maybe be repurposed as a bigger children's area or a meeting room that we desperately need. So it's not giving the staff more space, it's actually giving the public more space and using our existing facilities in the smartest way possible.
Again, some of the feedback that we hear from the public is that there's not enough study rooms, there's not enough meeting rooms. So some of that is what over time has happened, that they've become staff offices where they were originally designed as meeting rooms and study rooms and things like that. And so this is an opportunity to reassign them back to their original purpose. And again, I think there are a lot of symptoms and signs that the growth has affected our district, but whether or not those are transparent to everyone or the trustees or the members of the public, it's very clear to the staff. Response?
Wouldn't we want the staff to be on site, to be there to kind of be on call if something happens or need more help, to be there with the public? Why would we want to move them off site? And wouldn't a better consideration be to add on to our buildings, to look at doing that, to add on office space, as opposed to, and maybe a budget money for that?
So most of the positions that would be taken offsite would be things like finance and HR and technical services and processing. The district has, I think, 10 staff that are under administration, and then another 6 staff under technical services. And it's been an identification of who doesn't necessarily need to be in a public service environment. And so things like facilities, some of those things are not, they work at all of our facilities. IT works at all of our facilities. So it's really the identification. We need to be prioritizing public service. And I understand this trend or this direction to make room for staff, but at some point that has to end when the public is demanding study rooms and meeting rooms. And again, we're denying them service in order to accommodate staff that don't need to be in that facility. In terms of building on to a current facility, that's possible in maybe some locations. In some locations, it's not. I think I'll just give an example of here at Hayden. Since we're here, there's already serious concerns about parking. There's already serious concerns about this facility has been built onto several times. There's some security concerns and some other concerns about something like that for this facility. So it really, the most immediate solution would be to lease a space. It's possible that the board could put aside money to, or secure money to have an off-site administrative type of facility. Some libraries do that, or partner and have space like that. But our recommendation is to right now, commercial space is relatively available and minimally cost. So that would be our recommendation. Trustee Blank?
We have seriously looked at adding on to all the buildings in different ways and have added on to this building. It is, every single facility is extremely tight. The land is extremely tight. I absolutely don't know that we would be able to increase a footprint because that means increasing parking. And if you look at every single one of our parking lots, it's way too small. So, you know, I mean, it's certainly something that can be looked at again, but I will tell you, we've looked at it several times and it is just, we're maxed out in terms of that.
Trustee Botts?
Parking is one thing at Hayden that I guess I've never brought up, but I'm wondering why we aren't using the parking. We own land that goes out here towards Prairie Shopping Center, but that's in our land on the county lot for the Hayden Library, but it's being used by Prairie Shopping Center. Is there some kind of lease that we're leasing that to Prairie Shopping Center? Or what? Why don't we take it back if we've got shortage of parking? Because it just goes out here. You can look at the county map and see the boundary of our property. We're not using it for Hayden parking, so I think we should take that back if we've got a shortage of parking.
Director?
That should be looked into.
My understanding is that we have a cross-use agreement with Prairie Shopping Center. My understanding is that it is owned and maintained by the owner, which is not the library district. That's my understanding.
Trustee Blank?
That's true. And you're speaking about the parking that way. It's,
If you look at the county map, the plat, our land, it shows it goes out there.
right, that is used by staff all the time. It is used, it's a cross-use agreement. So in addition to the fact that perhaps some of the Prairie Shopping Center uses it, we also get an advantage of being able to use their property as well. So there is that has been very beneficial, and that piece of property is not underdeveloped and we don't maintain it. That's part of the cross-use agreement, but it is completely a parking lot, completely used.
Director?
And just to clarify a little bit, and I don't know which direction, north side or whatever, but so on the other side of the facility, there's kind of a parking area, and then there's a slight elevation into what I consider the Prairie site. So we are using, and it is paved, the entire area in the back that we own. And then as soon as you go up that little incline, that's where we no longer own and is owned, but we can use it. And so if you go out that way, you'll see our Discovery buses parked there. So we can use it, but we do not own it, is my understanding.
No objection, business manager?
So where the Discovery bus is not ours,
Right.
but the parking strip next to the barn above the landscape wall, that is ours. And that is used by
There's
staff.
8 spots or 10 spots. There's a designation.
Yeah, but we do have that where the bus is parked. We have been granted permission to park it there, but that is not our location.
Here, Trustee Alex?
This is the first time I heard officially of it was called a cross-use agreement. Is there a possibility of getting a copy of that? I don't want to give you a million things to look up, but I'm not familiar with that document. Thank you.
So we just have 5 minutes. I just want to make sure I wrote down everything that the board expects for the next June meeting. So we are going to be bringing some information from the class and comp study. the latest version for longevity and that information, and then are going to be sending out the 2022 report for everybody for review. And then we're going to be providing a current and a proposed organization chart. And then I just heard the cross-use agreement. Was there anything else that was agreed upon that we would be providing next budget session? And then again, just a little clarification, we are probably not going to be talking about budget at the regular meeting. It'll be at the end of June meeting that this information is brought. So just verifying that that's the expectation.
Response?
And also, the reference of the number of employees and category from last year.
This sheet, the red sheet.
I guess that would be it,
Okay.
last year versus this year's.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure I got everything, since there were several. And then if the board just wants to give some strategy, I mean, fair to consider, but maybe next meeting, also be prepared to give us some thoughts about facility master plan, the use of CAR, the outreach services, and the Harrison property. Again, it'll really influence the final budget. And then just as a recap, these are all estimates and these are early estimates. And as we get more concrete information and numbers, those will be adjusted as well. And then just to recap expectations, we have August 8th as our budget hearing, and we have review advertising. And so we will need to put forward, the board will need to approve something to be published in the newspapers in the end of July. So just kind of a recap of what it expected.
All right, yeah, if we could just get like a copy of last year's and update it a little bit.
So that includes, the percentage of, if you're taking any 1%, 2%, 3%. So you have to make some decisions, and then we're happy to format it. And then I think last year the clerk signed off on it. So I don't know if we'll have a new clerk but we're happy to walk them through that process. But just more of the calendar of events is listed here with the budget hearing. And so just keep in mind, we have a work session the 26th. So that'll probably be the date that, if not before, that we'll need that information. So we have a budget work session June 27th. And then we have one July 26th, and then you have to publish.
I'm sorry, who was next?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I think you've spoken last, so go ahead. Mike.
So I'm concerned about taking last year's published and just adjusting it a little bit. What we are supposed to be presenting is a realistic picture of what our budget will be for the coming year. It's not an adjusted a little bit. It is, we have to present what is going to look very much like our budget as it is expanded out at budget time.
Right, yeah, I remember that. I just was thinking it was an announcement saying this is the date. But yeah.
I was more highlighting that you have one really good meeting that I can bring more information to, and then that's pretty much the end. So if there's more information that you're going to need for decision making, we need to hear that. And if you have other ideas, we need to hear that as well. Because again, by the time July 26th rolls around, you're going to need to have discussed some things and come to some type of agreement or posting. And remember, you can post that you're going to take 3% or 2%. You can take less, you just can't take more.
Mr. Robinson?
I'm just looking here for, I was looking at the attorney costs. I see professional services on 78. I thought that was split A and B now. Just says professional services, 35,000. It was 35,000, now 40,000. So where am I missing oh, never mind.
74.
See it, thank you. Thank you very much.
The director to repeat and shares approval of the things you asked us to provide or think about. I think you said facilities master plan, carb carry forward, or maybe two other items. I didn't capture them all.
Yeah, I got three of them, facility master plan, use car Harrison plan, and I think there was outreach. What you said?
That's why I started recapping, right? You know, lots of stuff.
Okay, trustee Fox, and, we have 1 minute.
So on these, in your memo, you've got all of the things that you're recommending. But didn't you put those into this budget? The facility master plan, the legal services changing, the different, number of employees, and isn't that in this budget you gave us? Or is that for us to consider that?
No, it's not.
Professional fees.
Yes, everything that we've talked about is in the budget draft worksheet. The facility master plan is under professional services.
So if
It's not in there yet.
The facilities master plan consulting fees are not.
Oh, okay, so except for that, it does include the staff changes. It does include the office space.
my question is, if we were to say we would do 1% or 2%, but right now there's no reason to do that, because you've got that covered. But what would you do with that 1%, or what would you do with the 2%? What are you recommending? Do we have an idea of that from the staff?
I mean, my personal opinion is that comes back to risk. I feel like our risk for litigation is still slightly heightened, and our uncertainty for the insurance liability in our aging facilities, we could end up with an immediate need to replace a leaking roof or something like that, or the vehicle, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think part of my proposal would be authorize surplus the vehicles, put that in CAR for facility planning. And like I was saying, I do think it's appropriate to look at facility planning. That is still on my list, that is not in here. I think everything else is, though. I have to go back through and make sure, but I believe all the other items are. So I would, like I said, the things that I think are reasonable are offsetting some of the declining sales tax because of the economy and the facility master plan. And then, like I said, you have all of these capital improvements that have not been budgeted. Harrison, the Sprinter van. I would not recommend eliminating outreach or completely eliminating the Sprinter van. I would recommend using funds, setting aside those for replacement.
Can you make extra columns of 1%, 2%, and put in what you recommend for that? That's what I was asking. You got a lot of things you're throwing out there, and I guess what do you recommend if we were to get more money in the budget? What would we do with it? Maybe make a list.
I'm just going to be really blunt. I don't want to do the work of doing a 3% if this board is not even going to consider it. So just tell me more along the lines, is 1 and 2 doable? Is that something that if we had a really legitimate, good reason for fiscal responsibility that we do that, would they consider it? I don't ever consider this board taking a 3% based on.
That's just 1%.
Okay, is that everybody? 1%?
I would be willing to consider that. And I think you're right, the 3% is probably out of the question. Trustee Blank?
Not once have we talked about the fact that we reduced services to the community dramatically last year, and we're not increasing them this year. And I would really like us to look at that. I mean, we have reduced programs, we have reduced collections, and that was dramatic. And we aren't coming anywhere close. Nothing's been added here. And not one trustee has talked about that.
What are we providing for the community?
Okay, so if everyone can think about that until our next, meeting on the budget, and, it is now 4:03, and we are gonna go on break for 15 minutes. All right, the break is over and this meeting is called back to order. We will now be, discussing material selection and acquisition policy. And we left off last time at the responsibility section, which is at the very bottom of page 1. Actually, start until page 2. All right, so did anyone have anything for that one? Paragraph under responsibilities or responsibility?
Where are we? Oh, there's.
I think so. I don't know.
It's just Robinson.
So you're on responsibilities?
Yeah, we left off, we finished the section right before that, at the end of.
Okay, so, my confusion lies in why is there red still in the section right above?
Trust class?
That was actually where we were still, we voted one way and then we voted the other way. But that sentence doesn't make any sense to leave it. If it's either you have to take the second part of the sentence off or the first part of the sentence. We need to go back and revisit that. We can come back later.
Yeah, we will come back and.
But that's why it's in red, because
Okay,
it's confusing.
all right, yeah, so going in order or seriatim, is you're on the responsibility section, which the headline is at the bottom of page 1, and it actually starts on page 2. Trustee Hayden?
I have nothing, just suggested this at this time.
Okay, I have no changes. Do anyone else have any changes in the paragraph, or should we move on to definitions?
Silence is my answer.
Okay, I figured, I just didn't want to go on too quickly. I want to
Thank you.
make sure you guys have the opportunity.
Thank you, that's really nice, actually.
All right, so without objection, then we'll move on to the definitions section, and it looks like the materials inappropriate for minors, in parentheses, and CLN harmful to minors, we need to make a decision there. Test plus?
And the reason for that was, on the other policy at the end, we're swapped the names. So harmful to minors that we did have in this policy, we're using in the one that matches.
The one that's legally defined.
It's the same wording as what's in the Idaho law. That's why it's in there. So we're taking the title, materials inappropriate for minors, and putting it in this one is what we kind of have to do since they're two different definitions. We're swapping to this one in orange here.
Okay, yeah, I think there was some question on the word inappropriate. I had looked up harmful synonyms for that, and they were damaging, injurious, harmful influence, deleterious. Do you want to use any of those? Mr. Robinson?
First off, what would be the reason to use a cinnamon? What would be the reason for that? And also, we may have already heard from council on this, but I'm still not clear on if we can have one definition in this policy and a separate or different definition in a somewhat matching policy. I think we need a really clear answer on that, unless we've already gotten one and I'm not clear on it.
Council, did you want to answer that?
I'm not following the issue.
Did you want to ask again?
Can we have one? Is it? Council. Could we have one definition for material selection for harm inappropriate for minors and a different definition for the same similar issue in the reconsideration? Is it okay for us to have two different definitions in similar policies?
My answer is if you're gonna use a term of art, defined term, it should be consistent throughout all of the policies on the CLN website. So use a different term if you have a different definition.
So it seemed, I'm sorry, go ahead, trustee Boss.
Yeah, we've been over this so many different times. This is a selection policy for purchasing, and we can have a different definition. The other one has to, has to match the Idaho law, because that's the way it's been set up now. So we have to have a different name. Materials inappropriate for minors, that's really the only issue at this point.
Trustee Allen?
So I'm trying to make sure I understand. I think we have an Idaho description of what it means by harmful to minors. I think that's stated in statute how. So we're saying we're gonna give it a different name then for what we consider inappropriate minors for purchases. So we have a different definition and a name, and I'm sorry. The name and the definitions are I can't quite describe it though. Yeah, they're different. And so if we're gonna have different definitions, we need obviously a different name for it. And so whether, if this is what's being proposed, the new definition, materials inappropriate for minors, is that, I'm not sure myself. What is the name of the definition we're trying to come up with here? We have a definition, we don't have a name for it. Is this the name?
It was one suggestion. Trustee Blank, did you have a comment?
I had a question. If we are defining it differently in different policies that deal with the same thing but different, does that make us more legally vulnerable? Because I just heard our attorney say that it should be consistent throughout both policies, but this board is saying, no, we don't have to do that. But I'm wondering if we don't do that, does that make us legally more vulnerable or more legally vulnerable?
I think
That
that
we're
we've
not.
been,
I was asking the attorney.
yeah, I think he's answered that before.
I didn't
Is that
understand it.
term in the other policy though?
Yeah, there is materials harmful to minors, which is
In the acquisition?
in
Yeah.
the withdrawal and reconsideration. It's on the front page.
Trustee Boss, you
We're replowing this. The harmful to minors, we took the name and used that in the withdrawal policy. We have to get rid of it in this policy because it's a different definition. We took the one in orange, materials inappropriate for minors, that was the name in the withdrawal policy, and we are going to use it here. Because it can't have the same name. It's very simple. We're just changing the name, and we should line out CLN harmful to minors. And we're not changing the definition. We're just using different names for them so they don't get confused. I don't think it can be any clearer.
Okay, so, is the CLN afterwards, is that something that's, necessary? And, debate is debate and discussion is discussion. To sit there and say to trustees that it should be so clear to them, trust me, other trustees hold back on saying the same thing to others. I could bring up the $2 million slush fund that is brought up again today.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, I understand, but please, as a chair, stop when somebody's telling other trustees that they're stupid, basically, because they don't get what they're saying. Well, it goes around the table. And I'm tired of certain trustees making other trustees feel like, I don't feel this way, but they're trying to make us feel like we're stupid because we don't get it. We're having a discussion. And this policy has been on this table for a year almost. And it's not because of one person, it's because of several people. So I'm just tired of hearing this, it's simple, it's just simple. Why don't you get it? It's simple. Well, there's a lot of things that I think are simple that other trustees don't get. And I don't sit there and tell them that.
Okay, so that sounds like a point of order, and if so.
Point of order, could the chairs please keep a better order?
It's well taken.
Thank
We
you.
should speak more respectfully to each other. I was kind of debating in my mind whether that crossed the line. So, anyway, so if everyone could just try to speak more respectfully. Anyway, trustee Foss.
This is the proposal up here, is to use the orange that's there, that's why it was put in for discussion, and to get rid of the other one. The other one is now being used in the other policy.
Okay, I think
Is this clear right here
if I
on the screen?
if I had my glasses on, yes, it probably would be fair. I think the staff had mentioned that inappropriate might be too fuzzy of a word. And that's why I looked up the synonyms. I thought deleterious would be the most accurate word, but it's not very common, so it might not be the best choice. Trustee Blank?
I still didn't get my question answered by the attorney. We are talking here about things that are harmful to minors. That the library is going to be considering not purchasing because they're considered harmful to minors, but the two definitions are supposed to be different in the two policies. Is that making us legally vulnerable? And that's a question I would like to ask. I mean, we can decide till the cows come home what's harmful to minors, but ultimately what's harmful to minors, inappropriate for minors, whatever for minors, is what the law says. Is that not correct?
It looks to me like there's materials inappropriate for minors in the acquisition policy that has a definition. And then in the withdrawal policy, we're using materials harmful to minors. Correct?
Yes. Yes, because the Idaho law says it.
Okay, and so if we're using the baked-in Idaho law definitions, which appear in the withdrawal policy, 18, 15, 13, 15, 14, 15, 15, that's fine. But I don't think we should conflate terms.
What does that mean?
If it's ambiguous, it allows for more discretion, and more discretion leads to an individual agent of the governmental entity to be able to exercise the discretion appropriately, right? So the clearer we can make it, the better, I think. And we can get into Monell liability and the policy and the immunities that trustees and things have later. But if we want to use materials inappropriate for minors and have it defined, as long as that definition is okay legally, I don't care what you call it. You could call it MIM if you wanted to, right? It doesn't really matter what you say the definitional marker is, as long as when you see that marker, you know you're talking about the definition. But we can't use materials inappropriate for minor defined on page 2 of this board draft in the acquisition policy and then use it in the reconsideration policy, but it has a different meaning. That's what I was trying to convey. And I was getting confused about whether trustees are talking about the definition as we have set forth for materials inappropriate or the materials harmful to minors and the statutory definition. So I apologize for any confusion.
Trustee Hanley?
I was gonna say, if it's difficult to follow, if I understand, we have two different definitions. We have a definition in the withdrawal policy. We have a definition in the materials acquisitions. In the withdrawal policy, the word that we are, if you want to call it, or phrase that we've defined is statute, that's Idaho's harmful to minors. I think we're just simply struggling with and wrestling with what is a proper term or word we want to use to define this definition. So two different definitions. And the one we're looking at for acquisitions is a more stringent definition as to what we consider harmful or inappropriate for minors. And I think we have to try to find the right term so that it's easy to differentiate between the two definitions. So we have two very different definitions. We have a word that we've defined being in the withdrawal. That's not up for debate, I don't believe, later on. They just getting the right wording for what we're trying to define here, which we have a definition. So that's my understanding where we are right now. And I can live with materials inappropriate for minors or some other variation because it is definitely a different definition for the two different policies.
Okay, so we want to take out the CLN harmful to minors and throughout the article or throughout the policy and just call it materials inappropriate for minors, or do you guys want to use one of the other words, damaging, injurious, harmful? Mr. Robinson?
I don't mind the word inappropriate, and I feel like staff had mentioned a different word that like innocent or something. I don't know who's inappropriate. That was the one that they said was more subjective, but and this is another question for legal. Again, I don't care what this one's called, and if it's called a different name, I completely understand that it can have a different meaning. But doesn't letter C in the first section kind of bring it all back around to the Idaho Code? Doesn't that kind of make it all?
Yeah, we're not to that section yet. We're just on
No.
the first paragraph.
Yeah, that in definitions as used in this policy. So it absolutely has to do with, can we have a different, does a different definition even mean anything when letter C is in there? And again, that's for the attorney.
Yeah, I think it does. But the staff had different words and inappropriate that they would like us to consider. No?
I can just comment that based on some of the legal stuff that I've read, that inappropriate can be a problematic word if it's not clearly defined.
Okay, well, I guess it is pretty clearly
Yeah,
defined
there's a
here.
definition.
Okay, so I'm good with materials inappropriate for minors. Loss is good.
Yeah.
And Hanley is good, so, yeah, we're removing the CLN harmful minors, and so we'll be changing it from materials inappropriate for minors, and we have consensus or majority consent on that to change throughout. So there's another one on page 3. Actually, there's 2 on page 3. Actually, one of them is red, materials inappropriate for minors. And then down below the last bullet point, it has harmful to minors. We would also be changing that one to materials inappropriate for minors.
Oh,
So-
this one,
Was there another one?
no, it's the third one. Bullet point.
The last bullet point here?
Hang on, let me make sure that I get them all.
I don't think everybody needs to change their paper copy. There's a thing on a computer, you can just look up CLN harmful and it'll come up everywhere in the document and it can just be switched.
Okay, did we all verify?
Oh,
Well,
This is what I'll say.
double check if it's,
The first sentence, materials inappropriate for minors.
okay.
Agree? Right. Then second paragraph under selection process.
Point of order, is a trustee the actual document keeper? Is he the official document keeper that we need to sit there and look at this screen that he's changed all of his paperwork?
Traditionally.
It was a
no,
point of
we
order.
We did agree, so your point of order is not well taken because we did agree to have him, take.
I don't know about agree.
know.
I don't know if that's the right word.
Anyway, and the third one?
Right here.
Okay, all right, well then, is there anything else in that paragraph that needs to be changed?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Anything else in that first, the introductory paragraph under definitions?
No.
Okay, without objection, moving on to A, under that paragraph, anything in there? Trustee Claus?
I was just gonna say, someone else is welcome to do this. This is to avoid month after month delay that we seem to have anyway, because we can't get through it, but to get it changed and agree with what we all agree on the spot, not wait for a couple months for it. So, if somebody else wants to do it, that's fine.
Trustee Hannah?
You know, it's just my understanding, you're doing it as a guide. It's also helpful maybe for whoever's taking the official notes, as in the secretary and or someone designated by that person, but it's simply for us to wordsmith something, all see it put together. That isn't the official digital copy, is my understanding. It is whatever staff is doing, is my understanding of that. I don't think we switched the secretary's job to the clerks. I don't know.
No,
Okay,
I give it.
so without objection, moving on to, B paragraph, the average person, anything in there? Trustee Blank?
Just once again, remind me, these aren't from Idaho Code, is that correct? These are from something else, is that correct?
Yes. Okay, so anything in paragraph B that needs to be changed?
I was asking a question.
And I answered it.
Okay, and what was the answer? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Yes, correct. It was from.
Okay, so these, none of these, A, B, or C, none of them are from Idaho Code.
I
They're
did
from-
look up all these definitions and they are mostly the same, but no.
But it's not Idaho Code. I just wanted to be reminded.
So
Thank you.
without objection, moving on.
So I don't appreciate being interrupted. I was asking a serious question and I would appreciate being respectfully answered. You don't have to love me, but I simply wanted an answer. I was asking I wanted to be reminded, are they from Idaho Code? And all I needed was, no, they're not. That's all I needed.
I apologize for interrupting you. Trustee Claus.
So Chair, with due respect,
No.
we've already been through this many times.
It's been a while.
The only things that are of issue that we didn't get resolved are the colored lines. I would like us just to go do the colored lines, because we've already been through all of this about 10 times.
Right, well, yeah, you're right, we have been through it, so, I did have a change on that page that it can wait. Dr. Robinson?
Since it seems like we're gonna get fast tracked through this definitions as used in this policy, I would like to address my question on letter C, please.
Okay, so what was your question?
And it's for the attorney. I just want to know if letter C turns this definition into the same definition as the Idaho Code. As in, if a book was going to be acquired by the library, but had A or B in it, but C comes up and the librarian that's purchasing the book, it's like, oh, well, there is scientific value to the book that has nudity, sexual conduct, or there's political value of, I don't know what that would be, but does C turn the two definitions into basically the same definition? Therefore, it doesn't really matter what the name is, you still have to treat it the same.
As I understand your question, you're asking about how definition C under the materials inappropriate for minors definition turns it into Idaho Code. What I would say is this closely mirrors what the statute says, C specifically, and is a constitutional requirement. It's what you could call a redeeming factor of something that otherwise might be close to the line, or could be considered obscene or harmful to minors, notwithstanding that test. But Idaho Code 1815-14, 6A sub 2. Wait, sorry. Yep, that's right. Does say that nothing herein contained is intended to include or prescribe any matter which, when considered as a whole and in context in which it is used, possesses serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors, according to prevailing standards in the adult community with respect to what is suitable for minors. So from the average adult's perspective, related to the context of what this is presented in to the minor, if that has a serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, and it's otherwise obscene or harmful to minors, it's removed from that category. So it would no longer be inappropriate for minors under our definition, or obscene material or harmful to minors under the Idaho statutory definition. So it's very close, and there's the components of the average adult and the minor in there, and the community standards. Those are elsewhere in this definition, but that's going to be very, very common because that's a long line of federal court cases that require that. So it's not precise, but in substance, it's the same.
Okay, so, and I apologize for interrupting HRC. I would also appreciate if people tried not to raise their voices and spoke to each other with respect. All right, so yeah, we have been through the whole thing before, so it's not being abstract. We're just giving an opportunity for things to be discussed in case there was any other problems. There was at the bottom of page 2, that last paragraph, I was wondering if we should add under masochistic abuse, it says clad in undergarments, a mask, or bizarre costume. Should we add nude in there in case that was going on and the person wasn't clad in the aforementioned items? So we would add, so it would read a mask or bizarre costume or nude. So just insert the words in or nude there. Trustee Hammond?
I do believe we've already identified the nudity in just above that, there's nudity means, and one of them says it has to do with opaque coverings. So
Okay.
I assume that takes care of that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then I withdraw the suggestion. Trustee Robinson?
I also believe that nude in that situation is just torture. To be sadomasochistic, you have to be literally wearing something that kind of turns it that little bit.
I had no idea. I don't study.
Somebody does, because it's all over the policies.
All right, well then, there is nothing left on that page. Moving on to page 3. There is the last bullet point there. There's a section of bullet points, and it's in green lettering related to libraries, non-adult collections. What was the question on that? Trustee Box?
I think that went back to, we only listed 2, youth and teen or something, but, and we tried to cover everything, but the juvenile also, but when we changed this, we overlooked what was it, video and games or something. So there was another term that the librarians suggested we use, and it's in the other policy, I think.
Okay. Director, can you just rattle that off the top of your head, or I know I should look it up? Okay. First class?
It's under, we corrected it under withdrawal policy, materials harmful to minor on the first page. It shall be removed from the juvenile, teen, and young adult collections.
Okay,
I think that's what we want to use, is those words instead of non.
yeah, I think you're right.
And I think that's the only reason that was in green.
Okay, so for purposes of this criteria related to the juvenile, teen, and young adult collections, is that how you want to do that? Trustee Hanley?
Can you repeat those slowly, please?
Okay, so it would read related to juvenile, comma, teen, comma, and young adult collections. Okay, I'm good with that change. We have a majority consent on that. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so, Fox, Stanley, and Addison are a yes. Anyone else have anything to say on that? Okay, Trustee Hanley?
Yeah, I don't know where it fits in sequentially here. I have one miniature add-on, not to that, but of about 3 sentences regarding reports. And I'll read it very quickly. It says a monthly Excel report of all new items added to the library collection, whether purchased, donated, or donated, will be provided to all access and library trustees. The monthly report will be for the month preceding each regular monthly meeting, because we spoke about the fact that we're using the reports as a way of monitoring compliance. And so to me, having a little block in there that says reports, well, probably before the word gifts, I don't know. And then when the Excel report, the Excel format will be included in the board agenda and so forth. So I have a very small, whatever that was, 3 sentences to stick in there, because I think that we're describing things, we're going through this, and then we were creating reports. The reports were asked for, and they're only a requirement that's as good as the longevity and memory of the board. And by making that more solidified and having it in the policy, I think is desirable. So I can pass that up to pleases the chair.
Yes, actually, I didn't realize we're actually over time, so we will discuss that next time, but yeah. go
Let's
ahead.
pass it and I'll put it in.
Yeah.
Did I get this right?
Thanks.
Yes, actually, I think when I read it, I didn't read the libraries, so is that necessary? You said related to the juvenile, teen, and young adult collections.
So should it not have libraries? Is that what-
Yeah, because when I read it, that's the way we do it. We word of libraries, or that's what she's, the juvenile, teen, and young adult collections.
That's right now.
Yes. All right, without objection, we can table that just in case there's time at the end. I don't expect there to be, but just in case. All right, hearing none, it is tabled and we are moving on to the next section, which is discussion of materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy. Okay, and last time we left off on page 2 at reconsideration of material. So the part that's in orange, is that like a substitute? So we would be taking out the graph that's there and replacing it with the 3 or 4 paragraphs? Yeah, four paragraphs that are in orange. Is that the intent?
Yes, we never got that far. I handed out my version of it. And that was the intent, is to replace that paragraph with my version. And then the form that's following this.
Okay, yeah, we're not too far yet, we're just.
But this orange paragraph explains the form, explains the process.
Okay, I did like the orange section better, what do you think?
So this was presented to us by one trustee? Is that what it is? Did anybody go over it with the director or anything? I just was curious. How did this come to us?
Well, it's, you know, it's a, substitute paragraph, I mean.
Written
I mean,
by a trustee? I just was curious.
Yeah, usually when we amend things, that's how.
That isn't how it has been in the past. I'm just curious. This came from one trustee, this came from trustee Boss, just that was it. I just wanted to know.
First class?
Yes, at the meeting a month ago, I handed it out and we didn't get that far. I handed it out because I wanted us to consider it.
Okay,
And I
Thank
answered
you.
those questions at that time.
thank
And I was
you. I
asked,
didn't
what
remember.
was my
That's not
background?
correct.
What do I have for training and all that? You already asked all that.
Okay, so let's keep it as, consciously civil as we can.
I just wanted to know the answer to the question.
Uh, Could we have it? Go ahead, Mr. Henley.
You repeat where we are on the question here?
Oh, we
I
are,
was reassembling my last policy. I think I know where we are.
we are on page 2, reconsideration of material. So what has been suggested is that we replace the original reconsideration of material that's in black print with the orange section. Trustee Robinson.
Can we hear from staff what their opinion on because they're the ones that follow it, what their opinion on the two are? Because honestly, when I read the orange, I was a little bit confused and it seemed, I don't know if redundant's the right word, but I was a little bit confused on it. The upper one seemed more clear to me, so I'd like to hear from staff.
Without objection, consistent director.
The last sentence in that first orange or red paragraph where it says the form may be filled out for non-CLN items that are shared and received from CIN. That's not actually something that we would use this form for. People request holds, but holds go directly to their account. And so we would not actually be reconsidering something owned by another library. So if that statement stays in there, if someone turned in a form for that, like our answer would be, this does not apply. So it would be a waste of the person's time and it would not apply. Like we don't have any restriction over another library's item.
Response?
You always have to look at the form to understand this paragraph. The form, I believe that we need to have a way to deal with CIN books so that somebody with a minor with a card can couldn't order a book that's inappropriate. We need to flag it somehow so that a minor couldn't order that book. Yes, I know we're not going to reconsider and take it out of those other libraries, but we shouldn't allow a minor with his card to be able to order a CIN book. And I don't know how we do it if we don't have something. And this is a way for the community to say you overlooked a book. But if we just ignore the CIN, how are we going to prevent a minor with a minor card from ordering a book out of Liberty Lake or Coeur d'Alene that we don't allow in our books?
Thank you.
Oh,
They can have a card.
Would you guys like?
Yes, please.
Okay, Assistant Director, objection?
So the library board does not dictate what a child can or cannot read. It is up to the parent who signs the child up for the library card. So if they have a library card that is a restricted access card only to the juvenile collection, they would automatically be declined from getting any holds or any items that you're talking about in the statement. If the parent has elected to have open access, we do not have authority to remove that open access and block a hold that one of us or multiple people consider offensive. It's that family's personal choice.
I think it would be more effective to deal with that in the minors card policy, but anyway.
Another issue I had with the orange is the time frames. I didn't highlight them, but I think that some of those are a little bit, if the board goes with the orange, I think that some of those time frames need to be broadened and not so absolute, like there's like a 5-day or something. Let's see, so notified decision. Sorry, I didn't highlight them. Let's see. 10, okay. The CLN library director shall review and the completed form.
Could you tell us where you're at?
Oh, yeah, the second paragraph, sorry. Second paragraph, like second sentence, if that's I'm sorry, now I lost my place. Fully review the subject item and recommend that gives them 10 business days after receiving the completed form. I'm just saying in general, all the different timeframes, if this is the one people go with, I think need to be a little bit broader timeframe.
Thoughts?
The reason for this is state of Idaho is put a timeline of 60 days on this. We never had this before. So 60 days, somebody submits a form, that's day 1 or day 0. And if you're going to go through a process where it gets reviewed, it gets recommended to do nothing with, then it goes to the board. The next board meeting might be as much as 30 days later. The board has to review it and make a decision, and maybe that's going to take 30 days for the next meeting. And then, anyway, you don't have much time. That's why the staff has to work on a shorter timeline, and the board has to respond within 30 days total. Because there's also I believe it, that in that 60 days is a appeal.
I think that there are appeals after that, I think.
Well, we need to find out, but that's why I put those times in there, is because the state of Idaho has put us on a timeline.
Yeah, is it legal? Is it at the end of 60 days is when they can file something in court against us? So we want to have the whole process done by then?
Sure.
Plus?
I'm not talking about the filing in court. What I'm talking about is if we give a decision back and the citizen disagrees, we're allowing them a chance to appeal to us, and that's separate from the court. The court thing is after 60 days, I believe.
It says, upon receipt of written notice and subsequent to the expiration of 60 days, the institution's library board or board of trustees failed to relocate the material harmful to minors to an area with adult access only. So that was, let's see what section. Let's see, H 710, 18, 15, 17. Number. I'm not sure about the numbering and lettering on this. Sorry. Trustee Hannah.
The way part of that is written, the book was going to be removed from the shelf until it was resolved, so the book can't be there to create a lawsuit, I would assume, because it's still under review. So the review got delayed. Well, the book is already, if I read this properly, it says the item will be removed from the collection upon receipt of the form and remain so until it's resolved. So, so if it took 70 days, well, the book isn't there, so I would think that does.
You're reading that where? I'm sorry.
In the, I have two copies. Right?
Okay.
Remove from the collection.
Let me find it. Where is it? I have two copies.
Okay, I see it down, yeah.
Direction.
But that's not what,
Text box.
So resolved, what it says in the law, resolved means a final decision. I don't think it could go 70 or 80 days, even if the book is off the shelf, it's not resolved. So we have to give a final decision within 60 days, is why I take that. And then if they don't like our final decision, then they can go to court. So it's final decision from CLM.
Without objection, Assistant Director.
Best or standard practice within public libraries is to allow the item to remain in circulation and on shelf during the review process. By including this statement that it will be pulled from the collection during the review, we're essentially saying one person in the community doesn't like the book, and so everyone in the community cannot read it. And that is viewpoint discrimination, that is censorship, that's limiting access to information. So I honestly would highly recommend that we reevaluate the statement policy.
Trustee Henning.
It'd be difficult to evaluate the book when it's sitting on the shelf, so I assume it has to come off the shelf for staff to look at it before it gets put back, I guess. And then if it gets appealed, then I guess it goes to the board, but they have to read the book or look at the book as well and find out what's offensive. But or I think I have written in one of my statements here to be removed as necessary to review it. I don't know.
Trustee Robinson.
I believe you did at some point write something like that. And the original, of course, says that it is not removed except for that purpose. But don't forget that there are many times more than one copy of a book. So don't assume just because they remove it to review it, that it's going to be off the shelves. But I certainly don't think that it should be removed until it's actually completely through the whole process and deemed removable.
So legal, would it be illegal to move it off the shelves or potentially legally problematic?
Well, let's assume that a book isn't obscene or it's not harmful to minors and a community member files a complaint and the library removes all of the copies from circulation and someone walks into the library wanting to check that book out. And they ask the librarian, can you find this book? Yeah, we have it. It's in the back. Can I have one? No. Then what's the basis upon which the governmental entity is restricting that individual from access to the book that we have in the library? So it could be problematic if we're restricting access to information without any basis with the foundation of law. And so if this gets turned over and the book goes back on the shelf, then that person could access the book at that time. It could be problematic, right?
Yeah, and then that person could actually come at the library for holding it back for 60 days from them because their report was due a week ago. So it could go both ways that way as well, for sure.
Right, trustee Foss?
So when somebody pulls the fire alarm, we don't sit in our chairs and wait and say, let's do a search and find out if there's really a fire. No, we get out because we're trying to go with safety. If someone pulls a fire alarm that this book is harmful, we get it out of the way and then we evaluate. It's the same as a fire alarm. Everybody goes outside and does the fire alarm routine for safety. So I don't know why you wouldn't take it out. If somebody thought enough to pull the fire alarm, yeah, maybe they can be prosecuted, or maybe they can, if it was a false alarm. But if it's anything close to valid, it should come off the shelf for safety.
Logically, I agree, but legally, it doesn't sound like that's the way to do it.
Well, let me make one comment, if I may, because you're adding a second test there. If you're saying if it's close to, now we have another review determination that you have to make. And so that won't hold up. And the second thing I would say is that imagine if there was a coordinated effort for people to come in and challenge every single book in the library. Are we going to automatically restrict our entire collection for 30 days? We would have no books to offer the community, and the one I see is a 30-day period, and it could have been amended and not reflected on the legislature's website, but the one accessible from the legislature is a 30-day period. So if we're going to have an intermediate determination process, then we need to set that forth with some particularity, because you're going to have one of the library staff receive this report. They're going to have to go physically take that book off the shelf. They're either not going to look at the book, care what the book is, they're just going to find the call number and remove it, or they're going to look at the book and make a determination to remove it or not remove it, or they're going to just not remove it until the review is done. So are we now discussing an intermediate review process then?
Trustee Foss?
No, I shouldn't have said that. I'm not proposing an intermediate process. I'm saying that maybe we put a consequence in for somebody that falsely files something. But I totally advocate the fire alarm situation, get it out. Somebody in the community is alarmed about it and went to the trouble of filing one of these forms. Get it out until we get a chance to evaluate it.
Okay, trustee Robinson, go ahead.
I don't know if this will alleviate some of the concern. If somebody filled out a form and the librarian pulled it off the shelf and it was so shockingly horrific, I think that at that point, the librarian would be like, okay, I can see that it doesn't fall under what we should have in this section. And they probably, because they already have on their own accord, and it's been mentioned that they should on their own accord, they would address the book that they didn't know about, that's so horrific, fire alarm status, and they would move it on their own. Remove it or move it on their own. Also, conspiracy theory here, but somebody could come in, this is back to the time frame. Somebody could come in or a few people could come in, check out all of a particular book. Somebody also fills out the reconsideration form, but the staff has no access to the books because they're all checked out. And so within 10 days, they still don't have access to the book. They can't review it. And then they get in trouble because it wasn't done in 10 days. So that's the kind of thing I'm concerned about. Not necessarily that it's a coordinated attack to get the books out so that staff doesn't have access to them, but that's something that could happen. So I just think that back to the 10-day thing is just, it's just too short of a time. And yeah.
Director?
I'm just gonna mention that last meeting, I mentioned the Boise Public Library's procedure. Just for comparison, they're allowing 28 days for staff to review it. And they make a nice statement about, the director shall endeavor to submit a written response to the library board's decision within 28 days of receipt. The library board shall give the library director's written response and recommended decision substantial deference. The library board can adopt the library director's written response and recommend the recommended decision on its own with or without modification, or the library board can issue its own decision. So, I mean, that's, I think, a very nice way to say it, but I do think 28 days is more realistic. And that's 28 days versus, I think it was 10 business days, which could have been more too, but.
Okay, there is, sound like there was at least one other Idaho library that proactively was, using the BookLooks website, removing the very worst books from their regular collection and putting them in the adult access only, just, you know, if the library does its part, then the public won't have so many requests to reconsider. Anyway, Trustee Blank, did you have a comment? So,
I think that the miners card does that already. Our miners card already does that. Just what you suggested.
that would be a good thing. Trustee Glass?
So on the timing, look at the overall picture. Somebody submits the form. You've got 10 business days for the library staff. It doesn't have to necessarily be the director, but the library staff, however the director sets it up, reviews it. If the recommendation is no change, then that's saying the library staff thinks it's okay the way it is. Then it goes to the trustees to review and see if they agree. And I think you have to allow 30 days because of the timing of the board meeting. You should get it to the trustees right away so they can read it. But for them to have a meeting and make a decision, it has to be at the meeting, and that might be 30 days. So now you're up to, 40 days of the 60 days. And then you got to allow time to give the staff 5 days to get the decision back to the people. So now you're 45 days. Now the submitter may disagree and have an appeal. Now they've only got 15 days to do it. That's where I think if you try to get it less than 10 days, and unless the board's going to meet every 2 weeks or something, you can't get it all done in 60 days with an appeal. That's why it's there. So look at the whole picture.
The board is the appeal.
Yeah, so I agree. It seems like it's really staccato, but it's necessary to get everything within that 60 days. So I'm in agreement with that part. Director?
I thought it was a good idea. Again, Boise Public put in there that, and they explain the whole process and the constraints and everything that a board faces. But they put in there, if the library board does not issue a final written decision within 60 days of receipt of a request for reconsideration of materials or a written notice, the submission is denied. And so I think, the board should consider a term like that just in case some date goes by and we miss it. I would also say that they do a nice job describing that library administration shall maintain a case file for each request for materials or written notice submitted. And again, it outlines very specifically what information is going to be tracked. And this is, I'm going to just frame it for the case of potential litigation. And again, I really think that the board needs to, as I said before, give deference to the director or the staff's recommendation in writing. They need to involve library staff to make sure that we have the documentation that we need. And there should be we tried everything we could, but we couldn't do it within the timeline, kind of default statement as well. And those are not in the policy currently.
Okay, yeah, I actually didn't like that stipulation from Boise. It just seemed like, they might be purposely not ruling on stuff so that it's just by default denied. So, so we have like 5 more minutes. Trustee Fox?
I don't think it's necessary to put it in the policy, but it should be implied that if the library staff in the 10 days decides not to remove it, they should give the information of why they decided that to the board. But we can say they have to give us their ruling or their evaluation, so the board isn't starting from scratch. But if the board has already got the review from the library board, there's probably a good chance they're going to go with it. So do we need to add that the library staff needs to give a written evaluation of what they found when they reviewed it? That could be added.
Yeah, I would think so, but actually, before we get to that, I think we're just trying to ferret out if there's any major problems that made the whole thing unworkable. But I do like the orange part better. I think some of it needs to be changed. But so do we have majority consent to replace the reconsideration of material with the paragraph under that was already there with the orange section? Trustee Henley?
Meaning, we take it, but we still can greatly edit it at a future meeting. I assume.
Yeah.
Because I have all kinds of marks I made on mine of editing to do, but I like what I see, but it certainly needs refinement.
Agreed. So do we have majority consent to replace it with the idea that we are going to continue to work on the orange section?
No.
Okay, so Foss, Hanley, and Addison are in agreement to replace the reconsideration of material that was in black print with the orange print. Okay, Trustee Robinson?
Is it July 1st that these need to be completed?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Blank?
So the board majority just said that, but every time some kind of legal consideration comes up, it's just smoothed up. A legal consideration was brought up. And so I'm certainly hoping that it is, it's got a lot of problems.
Yeah, I've got a couple of sections marked that were mentioned, one legally problematic and the one. Anyway,
Sure. I did find the engrossed copy of the amended bill and confirm that it did replace the 60-day period with the 30. So
I thought
it did.
Can you say again?
What does the 30-day mean?
It went back, remember it went to the Senate, this 1517B State Affairs Committee, and then it got amended in the Senate, and they replaced this 30-day period with the 60-day period. So I did find that engrossed bill online to confirm that, so.
So engrossed means final or?
Like the one that would be sent to the governor.
So it has 60 or?
Yeah, 60.
Or 30? Okay.
Is that wrong?
No.
Okay, so, well, maybe we could get some then. All right, so we are moving on to executive session. We have a motion.
I don't think it's, we don't need all the details at the end, do we? I don't think so.
No.
I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-206. I believe it is, or one B, D, in executive session.
As we move to go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-206-1 convene an executive session. It will be a roll call vote. Mr. Blank?
Aye.
Ms. Robinson?
Aye.
Trustee Foss?
Aye.
Trustee Henley?
All right.
And I'm an aye, so it is unanimous, and we will be going into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-206-1BB. So this is just for the board.
No, you colored it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I move that we extend the meeting to 6:15.
Okay, it has been moved to extend the meeting to 6:15. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay, it is unanimous. We are extended to 6:15. Okay, and then I would entertain the motion to go back into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code.
Why are we going back in?
Oh,
We're done.
We're on number 9 now.
right. Okay, so sorry. Yeah, it's the wrong. All right, so the board has concluded the board has concluded deliberation in executive session and are moving on to the associated action item in number 9. I would entertain a motion to authorize the chair and the attorney to proceed as directed in executive session.
So moved.
Okay, so trustee Hanley has moved that. And
Did you get
I need to.
I have it if you need it.
Okay. So all those in favor, or is there any? No, there shouldn't be. Anyway,
No.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it is unanimous and the motion is carried that we authorize the chair and attorney to proceed as directed in executive session. All right, so then, we are moving on to item number 10, set special and regular meeting dates. I think that we could stand some more work on materials policy and tying up loose ends. So like Monday the 3rd or Tuesday the 4th.
Yeah.
Trustee Robinson?
Didn't we already make meetings for all of that? I thought we were gonna make a meeting right now for another executive session.
Yes, that's it. I'm just, some of the time that we made is like at the end of the month and really to be fair to staff, we don't want to wait that long if we can get it done beforehand. And since we need to have another special executive session anyway,
Okay.
I think that we should combine those. So what's everyone's availability for Monday the 3rd?
I'm open for 3rd and 4th.
I'm open for 4.
Okay, I'm open. What did you say about the 4th?
I'm not available on the 3rd and Lindsay and I have a meeting on the 4th.
Okay, so it needs to be the,
Like what time on the 4th?
If you just keep it to a special meeting with executive session maybe, and then schedule another meeting when everybody's available.
Just do that.
Oh, we
Just do
definitely
that.
need 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, we just do.
okay, so it sounds like the 3rd, it would be the afternoon.
For a special meeting and executive.
No,
Just executive.
just executive session.
Well, isn't a special
I mean,
meeting
special
any
meeting.
meeting other than our regular
Oh.
meeting?
A special meeting with a just executive session as the agenda.
On the 3rd.
On the 3rd would be good.
The 3rd, I'm fine if I'm out of here by 4:30.
Like, why can't we add an hour or two?
Yeah, we could, so noon on.
What about, I mean, this could be just executive session and it doesn't have to be real long.
Doesn't have to be, but I mean, as long as for a meeting,
Like
I would like to
noon?
have more of the materials.
Oh my gosh, you guys.
Later in the afternoon.
Okay, so 1, 2,
2 would be
3.
great.
3, okay,
3 to 5 is up.
3 to 5.
You have to be out.
I can probably switch it. I can probably switch it a half hour later.
Is
So
this for executive session or a combination of executive session?
Combo.
and- Okay,
Okay, so, and I'm sorry, you need to leave, you said,
I can move mine down a half hour, so I can leave at 5.
okay, so 3 to 5 on Monday, the 3rd.
And the agenda is executive session.
Executive
the same
session.
citation as was today. And
And maybe add A in there, was that the one that was mentioned? I don't remember, so A, B, and D, one, A, B, and D. I can't do it.
okay, I'll follow up.
Did you say 3 to 5?
Yeah, 3 to 5, Monday.
And then it's also gonna have policies. You know,
Materials, yeah.
even though the rest of the staff can't come and we have to set up and video and record.
Yeah, that,
I
It
really,
really needs to be just executive session.
yeah,
don't
we
have
should
to-
accommodate
we don't have
them too.
resources.
Okay.
What about the
I
6th?
don't want to hear any complaints when we have yet another special.
What about on Thursday of that week? For, for another special meeting?
Okay, so in addition to the 3rd?
Well, if the 3rd is just executive.
Okay,
Okay, we make that a lot shorter.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like that at
so we could
4:30.
even,
The Monday one at 4:30, if all it is a special session.
okay, well, if we do it at,
I have to leave at 5.
if we do it at 3:30 or 4, then she may not have to reschedule her thing.
Like 3 to 4.
3 to 4?
Exactly.
I'd rather have it later if I could. 3:30 to 4:30.
Staff available after 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Are we on 3:30 to 4:30 right now?
What are we on, 3 to 4?
Or should
First,
we-
we have to be done by 4, so how about 3 to 4?
Okay, or
3 to 4 on Monday, is that what it
are
is?
we really going to need a special session on Monday?
True.
We need to have an executive meeting on Monday.
Maybe not. What if things haven't progressed?
Yeah, but we need to plan it now. You can cancel it, but you can't say we're gonna have one if there's only a few 24 hours to post it. In fact, it's Thursday right now. So Monday's right around the corner.
Well, it's not business days, it's at least,
Right, but we might as well plan it and then you can
Right.
cancel it.
okay, so 3 to 4 on Monday, the 3rd.
Yeah.
And then-
Session.
And then also on Thursday,
Thursday, the 6th.
so 6th.
What time is that?
3 to 5.
3 to 5 or? Is that?
I would like to just get it done. Maybe we could have a start time of 2 and say to close if we don't get it done. Or, because I know you said last time you would stay here until,
Yeah, we
yeah,
have to finish.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
No,
have
I'm only
that
kidding,
construction meeting Post Falls that day until 2. So I can't come before. That's been tough, maybe 2.
okay, so 2 or 2:30?
Even 3 would be tough.
3 to 6.
Even 5:30, 3 to 5. 3 to 5.
3 to 5 on the 6th.
Okay.
Yeah, we go.
I'm available,
Oh, I'm not pushing. I thought that's what I heard. Is that right?
close.
3 till closing?
So what is the time for the 6th? 3 to 5, is that what is said, what you said?
I think it should be open-ended at the end, just have it, the room reserved until close, and let's just get her done so that staff can make their plans.
What is closed? What time is closed?
8.
Getting pizza?
Are you buying?
Okay.
Sure.
I'll take the question. Okay, so 3 to 8 with pizza.
3 to 8.
But
That's not happening. That is not
necessarily
happening
Gonna
for
go
me.
down like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully it doesn't take that long. All right, so then,
Is there a room available? Good.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, I can look it up.
all right. Okay, so then if there's no other special meeting dates that we need to set, I would entertain.
Then I will move that we adjourn. Oh,
I noticed on the calendar of events that the August regular meeting is not on there.
On the agenda?
At the bottom of the agenda, the calendar of events. We have the budget hearing on August 8th, and then it has the special meeting, possible budget adoption on the 22nd. It's missing the regular meeting
August 15th.
on August 15th. And I don't know if we have a location for that.
Okay, well, then, I guess we'll need to find out if there is a location. If there isn't, we'll need to change it. Now, there's a motion on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it is unanimous and we are adjourned.